Chapter 42-43. Second more. There was a rush of discussion, how Ember dominated his head, and a pride rushed on his face. Now, he has a sense of accomplishment when he hears praise from others for his blood sword. Within the 6th floor of the pagoda, Jian Wushuang's expression was dignified, gasping slightly, and there was no relaxation at all. The test of the 5th layer of refining tower is a swordsman strong from ancient times who understands the dominance of swordsmanship. He is extremely powerful, even if he is also after a fierce battle. Xing Yi Jian, it was extremely difficult to kill it. Of course, after slaying this ancient swordsman, Jian Wushuang's gains are just as great. He gained all the insights of this ancient swordsman on the kendo. Jian Wushuang can feel that his realization of the 3rd heavy sword meaning is like a bucket not filled with water. As he absorbed the swordsman realization of the sword fighter and the ancient swordsman, he gradually became complete. No dirt. He only needs to absorb the origin of a kendo master in kendo, and he can break through the 3rd source of cosmic kendo and reach the 4th source of kendo. At that time, his attack power and sword power will be changed again and again. As he thought, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and looked around. Here is the 6th floor. On the 6th floor, there is nothingness and chaos. The strong regular atmosphere inside it is enough to compare with Wu Dao Hanoi. In this nothingness and chaos, there is only one giant painting hanging. In this giant painting, there is a figure wearing silver armor and holding a long sword, like the figure of a guardian knight, like the general of ancient heaven. The figure's face was covered with silver armor. He could not see his face clearly, only his closed eyes were exposed. He is very tall, full of the solemnity of Bao Xiang, a sense of inviolability. Jian Shuangshuang saw this. His eyes flashed a moment. With just a glance, he felt the threat of the silver armor. Next moment, "Mortal, do you challenge God's majesty?" A sound like a rolling thunder emanated from the giant painting. Immediately afterwards, she saw the silver armor general in the portrait, and suddenly opened her eyes. The 2 fronts were so sharp that they burst out from his eyes. Jian Wushuang didn't reply, but took a deep breath and held up the Wu weapon sword in his hand. This sword cannot be avoided. Click and wipe. Immediately afterwards, the image began to crack in the middle, and then a silver armor was seen in the image. 2 hands grasped the crack in the image and stepped out from the image. A shock of coercion suddenly came to the audience. Under this coercion, this chaotic world seemed to tremble. "Mortal, I am 300 years before the chaos era. The first under the seat of the godless will be Fei Hong, and the ultimate master who died in the hands of the will be countless. You have done a good job to pay the price of life to challenge the majesty of the majesty?" Fei Hong's sword was expressionless, and his eyes were full of oppression and looked at Jian Wushuang. "There is so much nonsense." The sword Wushuang snorted, and immediately drove the Wu weeping sword, turning it into a sword on, and killing it towards Fei Hong God. "My kendo, just to kill and feel the power of God." Seeing this, Fei Hongshan suddenly pulled out the Excalibur in his hand, a feeling, and was instantly taken from the Excalibur in his hand. "Open the sky." Jian Wushuang's head was full of black hair flying, and he gave a cold drink, and in the hands he opened Tian Jian Mang to be cut off towards Fei Hong God. Small power. Fei Hongshan shook his head unconsciously, waved a sword, and slammed into Kai Tian Jianmeng. This sword was just chopped out by himself, but it was full of oppression and killing, as if there was a force invisible, which would drag people into the blood of the dead. "Ha!" A blast came, and the unfavorable Kai Tian Jianmeng was actually broken by the Fei Hong God. "It's strong." Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes, and he felt it just after a fight. The Fei Hong Shenjiang's combat power is absolutely invincible, which is higher than any person he encountered in the refining God Tower before. Come strong. The law of the universe, willpower. Immediately, Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated, directly using the 10 times the willpower given to him by the universe, and his whole body power soared 10 times. After all this, Jian Wushuang whispered, "Chopper Star." Baizhang Jianhong condensed instantly, holding the sword with no hands holding the Baizhang Jianhong, like the peerless sword Advent, severely chopped down towards Fei Hong Excalibur. This sword is enough to kill the stars. Oh, this sword is remarkable. Fei Hong Shen raised his eyebrows, and there was a touch of wonder in his eyes. Immediately after, he shook his head and said, "But that's all it is." After that, the magic sword of Fei Hong Shen was covered with a burst of blood, and then fiercely hacked towards Baizhang Jianhong. Killing Kendo is as invincible as Kendo. A blood dragon fiercely rushed out of the magic sword from Fei Hong Shen, screaming in the world, and opened his huge mouth to bite on Baizhang Jianhong. A tyrannical sword reached the extreme sword. Immediately the blood dragon shot out, and wanted to press Baizhang Jianhong under him. Click, 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 click. Suddenly, the blood dragon and Baizhang Jianhong were glued together, and the two swords continued to collide and entangle, sending out a muffled sound of broken void. It seems that the Fei Hong god will realize the origin of Kendo and reach the third level of success. Jian Wu's eyes flickered, his mind flashed. If after defeating Fei Hong Divine Sword, he got his insights on the origin of Kendo, and Jian Wushuang is confident, even if he can't immediately break through to the origin of Kendo on the fourth floor, it is only a matter of course. After a while, Fei Hong, who seemed to be extremely tricky, was now in the eyes of Jian Wushuang, and became a fragrant puppet that improved the understanding of Kendo. Immediately, a decisive flash of light flashed across Jian Wushuang's eyes, and more than 13,000 times the power of God broke out. The laws of the universe also merged into his sword skills, and he no longer hesitated to kill the Fei Hong Excalibur. Talented, supernatural. At the same moment, the original universe of talented supernatural beings that can reduce the opponent's strength by a large arc is urged by the sword unparalleled, and the entire sixth floor of the refining tower is full of suppression of Fei Hong. Oh, mortal, I have to admit that you are indeed qualified to challenge me. Fei Hong Shen shrank the pupil in his eyes, again without any reservation, the majestic and overbearing divine power, and the equally unfathomable laws of the universe, all burst out. He was full of breath and began to skyrocket. Mortal, feel the power of God. Boom! A kendo duel across space and time kicked off. Chapter 42-44. The first is more. Ha! In the sixth level of emptiness and chaos, Fei Hong Shen and Jian Wushuang turned into one silver and one black and two shocking swordsmanships, and they were constantly colliding together. Fei Hong Shen battled the silver-winged Excalibur in his hand, and the Wu weapon Excalibur in the hands of the sword. He fought thousands of times in a short instant. The majestic divine power exploded in the void. Open the sky! Chopper stars! With a swipe of his right hand, Wu Wuxian's sword tremor in his hand trembled tens of thousands of times instantly. He opened the sky and cut the star in two styles. He successively drew from Wu Wuxian's sword and blasted it towards Fei Hong God. Magic! God angry! Fei Hong's Excalibur is also cold, and the face covered by the silver face armor, only the eyes that are exposed, have skyrocketed by 3 inches. Behind him, a pair of silver wings appeared, and the silver wing Excalibur in his hand was instantly covered by thick blood, a mighty power that destroyed the sky and heavens, shot out of his hand with a scary sword. Prestige, cut! Immediately, Fei Hong God leaped high, and the silver-winged Excalibur turned into a monstrous blood dragon in his hand, chopped down towards the sword unparalleled. The two retreated at the same time, and the body shook. Jian Wushuang looked down at his right hand, and his mouth was numb for a while. The next moment, he looked up at the Fei Hong general, and there was a dignified meaning in his eyes. This is the only person in Kendo who did not lose to him after he came to the depths of the universe. Mortal, I have to admit that you have the ability to compete with God. If in my time, you would be no less powerful than the true God of Kendo. Fei Hong God said solemnly to the treasure. Noise. The sword had no expression on both sides, and took a deep breath. Talented, amazing life. Boom. A deterrent force from the deepest part of the soul came to the audience. Under this force, as if time had fallen into the swamp, everything must be subject to it, kneeling in front of the sword without double sides, and bowing his head. This? Fei Hongshun changed his face instantly. When he wanted to attack, he felt as if there were millions of mountains resting on his body. He couldn't move at all. He couldn't control and wanted to kneel down towards the sword. You dare to obey the prince? He spat out these words in a difficult way. Jian Wushuang did not answer, but his eyes flashed, and he was going to kill Fei Hong God immediately. Call out. Without hindrance, the sword of Wu weapon with no hands and his sword was directly inserted into the chest position of Fei Hongshun, and then the sharp sword exploded. Mortal, take a good look at my killing kendo. Fei Hongshun will take a deep look at Jian Wushuang, then the body collapses, and he is strangled by the sharp sword to become a fan powder. A trace of black line floated above the place where Fei Hong Excalibur disappeared, and then shot towards Jian Wushuang's brows. Jian Wushuang did not resist, seeing that he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes slowly. A grand voice sounded in Jian Wushuang's mind. I, Fei Hong Xinjiang, the Excalibur in the hands is only for killing. Boom! Suddenly, a large group of Fei Hong gods will feel on the kendo, mixed with his memory, and instilled into Jian Wushuang's mind. The world in front of Jian Wushuang suddenly began to change. Just like traveling through space and time, before reaching the 500 chaos period, Jian Wushuang saw a teenager with a clear eyebrow, just 7 or 8 years old, holding a wooden sword and dancing constantly under a hillside. This is the feminine of childhood. Is the memory inherited? Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, then closed his eyes slowly, immersed in the memory belonging to Fei Hong. The scorching sun was shining, and the young man was sweating like rain. His white shirt had been soaked with sweat. But he did not give up, his eyes were full of fortitude, he bit his teeth and kept waving the wooden sword in his hand. Over and over again, the sword shadows overlapped and intertwined, accompanied by the juvenile heavy panting sounds, and the summer cicadas whistled in the mountains. I, Fei Hong, must be the most powerful swordsman in the world. The sun is slowly setting, and under the hillside in the setting sun, there are juvenile ambitions. Xiaofei, come back for dinner soon. Your father bought a big herring from town. Down the hillside, the smoke of smoke rose, and a farmer woman carried a hoe, wiped the sweat on her forehead, and shouted, Mother, I'm here. Fei Hong quickly hid the wooden sword in his hand, took the bull on one side, and hurried down the hillside. This year Fei Hong was 8 years old. Turn around in time. This year, Fei Hong was 19 years old. This year was the only time in the nearby town that the Aoyama Sword School accepted the apprentice. Fei Hong refused his parents' hope to let him go to Beijing to take the test, and asked the village's Wang blacksmith to strike a rough and ugly iron sword, then sneaked out of the village and came to the gate of the Qingshan Sword School. He was mixed with a group of teenagers who also came to study and learn, and he was a little nervous. According to legend, the people who live on the Qingshan Sword School are all legendary immortals, who can take the sword for thousands of miles and be very powerful. And he is just a farmer who releases a cow, and he has practiced a few handy swords and tricks, and he really can't put it on the table. After a long wait, it was finally Fei Hong's assessment. He summoned the courage in the serious eyes of the old man in charge of the assessment. He slowly walked up. Awakening of the soul of the sword. The body of the sword spirit. However, when the assessment results came out, the entire Castle Peak Sword School shook. Fei Hong, from the release of a cow in a farmhouse, has become the most dazzling star among the entire Qingshan Sword School. None of them. He paid tribute to the most powerful elder in the Qingshan Sword School, and countless resources leaned towards him. Time is long, years are ruthless. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter are constantly swimming. In a matter of seconds, 10 years have passed. At that time, the immature baby cowboy had become the master of the Qingshan Sword School, the star of the entire Qingshan Sword School. At the moment, Fei Hong, 29 years old, has a strong spirit, is confident and calm, and has a handsome appearance. Even when he was immersed in the harmony and tranquility of this division. Abnormal change, sudden emergence. When he went out to perform the Zhongmen mission, he provoked the young master from this area's strongest Zhongmen purgatory Jianzong and angered him to kill. In a hurry, great disaster is coming. His Qingshan sword school was slaughtered from top to bottom, and the elders who were kind and gentle, and the lively and playful teachers and younger brothers and sisters died in front of him. He watched the scene as he watched, but with little resistance. For the first time, he realized that he was so weak that he was only a trivial ant in this world. In the end, under the full force of the Qingshan sword sect master, Fei Hong fled to the sky and was sent out of the Qingshan sword sect. Chapter 42-45. Second more. This blow made Fei Hong despondent, and he was wandering around like a bereavement dog. Suddenly, he wanted to go home and see his parents who hadn't seen it in 10 years. They should be old. However, when he returned home, the scene in front of him made him collapse. Blood bleeds into the river, and corpses cross the wild. All the people in the whole village were slaughtered by the people of Purgatory Sect Zone. The parents' bodies were then thrown away by the roadside, almost already eaten by wild dogs in the mountains, with a pungent stench. At this moment, Fei Hong's tense heart finally broke, and he couldn't help it anymore and burst into tears. He knelt down in front of his parents' body, dug a hole in the ground with his hands, and buried his parents' body tremblingly, burying them with one lus and one lus. On this day, it rained heavily. During the thunder and lightning, Fei Hong knelt down in front of the tomb, her hair turned white overnight. He knelt for 3 days and nights in front of his parents' grave. The spirited master disappeared and turned into a wild man with red eyes, dry lips and messy white hair. This time, he raised the sword in his hand. As a teenager, he practiced his sword under the hillside, and Fei Hong's magic sword danced wildly in the rainy night. The electric fan thundered, and the thunder was loud. On this day, Fei Hong Wu came out with the killing swordsmanship. Finally, in front of his parents' grave, Fei Hong struck his head 3 times and left with his sword. Time goes by, and a century has passed. In this century, Fei Hong tried the sword to challenge the world's kendo masters. He has traveled thousands of miles, 3 mountains and 5 mountains, and kendo has been repaired for thousands of miles a day, and he has quickly improved. Whether it is a well-known veteran kendo master or a newly emerged kendo genius, they have all become the ghosts of Fei Hong. None of Fei Hong survived. Finally, until one day, Fei Hong rose to 3 realms and became one of the top masters in that 1,000 world. He understood that it was time to revenge. Fei Hong, the sword-seeking ceremony of Purgatory Jianzong. On this day, Fei Hong stepped on the Excalibur with a chi of 30,000 miles, turned into a peerless sword rainbow that runs through the world of sun, moon, and sky, and swept over the Purgatory Jianzong blandly. On this day, Fei Hong's sword is light and cold on the 19th continent. In this small world, countless people all look up at this peerless sword fairy who cuts the stars. Kill! Countless kendo masters rush out from Purgatory Sect. The killing began. In this battle, the sun and the moon killed, the Shenzhou Lu Shen, the entire sky was replaced by blood. No words can be used to describe the tragic battle. Fei Hong's expression was indifferent, and his sword relentlessly took away his life. In Purgatory Jianzong, no matter if it is an old man who is drowsy and exhausted, or a childish boy who has just worshipped in Purgatory Jianzong, no one can escape the killing of Fei Hong. The sound of wailing, begging, and crying kept ringing in Purgatory Jianzong. But no one can touch Fei Hong's already frozen heart. Flowers blossoming in blood, blooming its beauty. On this day, there was a blood rain in Purgatory Jianzong. On this day, Purgatory Jianzong, all doors were slaughtered. On this day, there is no Purgatory swordsman in the world. Fei Hong's heart has been counted, killing kendo, so far. When he walked down from Purgatory Jianzong, the corpse, blood, and sea became his background board. Suddenly, Fei Hong became confused. In this world, there are no loved ones, no good friends, and even the enemy is gone today. Suddenly he wondered where he should go. He looked down at the sword in his hand, and he understood. Years have passed since then, and the only thing he can rely on is the sword in his hand. He, Fei Hong, will live for kendo, only for killing. In the rest of the years, Jian Wu watched Fei Hong with his eyes open, and started his invincible years. He watched Fei Hong's undefeated battle, counterattacked in the killings again and again, reversed the victory, and set foot on the top of the world. He watched Fei Hong become famous all over the world, suppress 9 days and 10 places, grow up in a series of killings, and constantly understand the killing of Kendo, until he broke through the triple roots of Kendo. He watched Fei Hong step into the ultimate realm, become the invincible dominator, and open up his era. He watched Fei Hong be the first general under the seat of the godless god, giving the sword silver wings. On that day, the entire universe was shaken forever. Fei Hong's first spread the name across the stars, invincible. The memories belonging to Fei Hong Shen gradually faded away. The final picture of Jian Wushuang stayed at the moment when the sky fell and the Fei Hong Shenzhen fell. From the farmer who released the cow at that time, to the esteemed Qingshan swordmaster, and then to the world-famous Fei Hong Shenzhiang, Jian Wushuang saw his ups and downs, frustrated until he fell. In a short time, Jian Wushuang has seen the legendary life of Fei Hong Excalibur. The next moment, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. 2 gods flashed away from Jian Wushuang's eyes. As Fei Hong God faded the memory, Jian Wushuang felt that his understanding of the origin of the third kendo was suddenly changed. The bucket with a spoonful of water at all was finally replenished with the integration of the killing kendo. Jian Wushuang obviously felt that he is now far from the origin of the fourth heavy kendo, and he has already crossed the threshold with 1 foot, but it is just a line apart. As long as he quietly perceives 1 or 2 and breaks through the origin of the fourth kendo, it is only natural. Inside the 6th level refining tower, a vortex suddenly appeared in an empty and chaotic sky. Jian Wushuang knows that entering this vortex is the 7th floor of the refining god tower. The 7th floor is also the highest record reached by countless Tianjiao since the opening of Xingkong Ancient Road. Jian Wushuang stood up, looked up at the huge vortex in the sky, and there was a flash of determination in his eyes. The legend of Fei Hong Xinjiang has ended, and the legend belonging to his sword, unparalleled, has just begun. Jian Wushuang struck his right foot hard, his body burst out and disappeared into the vortex. At the same time, refining the tower outside. OM. An extremely melodious bell sound turned into a circle of sound waves, rippling in the 10th city. At this moment, the entire 10th city is horrifying. Everyone raised their heads sternly, looking at the refining god tower. Their eyes were filled with incredible shock. 7th floor. The blood sword has reached the 7th city. Since 800 years ago, after the Overlord reached the 7th floor, no one has reached the 7th floor. Blood Sword, after the Overlord, will become the 2nd person to climb the 7th floor of the refining tower. Creating records. Starting from the 7th floor, every step of the Blood Sword will create a new record. Countless people panted heavily, amazed again and again. Even the blue adult who is one of the 9 giants, the face covered by the veil, there was a touch of shock. Chapter 42-46. The first is more. The whole city is shocked. At this moment, all the people in the entire 10th city gathered outside the Lianshan Tower, staring at it. Legend. They are about to see the rise of a legend. The Emperor was so excited that his fat fluttered. He only felt that following the blood sword was the most correct decision in his life. He will be a witness to the legend. Time passes slowly. The speed at which Jian Wushuang broke through the refining tower was slowed down like never before. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. But everyone's face was full of impatience. They were all waiting for Jian Wushuang to create a legend. I remember the last time the Overlord was on the 7th floor and spent a full 100 years, but still failed to break through the tower. The record of refining the tower as of now is the 7th floor reached by the Overlord and Blood Sword. I wonder if the Blood Sword can break the record. What do you mean by what is on the 7th floor? When the Overlord came out from the 7th floor, he kept silent about the 7th floor and kept secret. Wait for the Blood Sword to come out, maybe the Blood Sword will give us an answer. 1 year. 2 years. 3 years. Sword without feet on the 7th floor, stuck for 10 years. Just when everyone thought that Jian Wushuang would be like an Overlord, when he spent hundreds of years on the 7th floor, a bell-like sound like Hongzhongde Lu suddenly blew up from the height of the 10th city. Boom! This bell rang, as if coming through the flood-waste universe, with an endless ancient breath. It rang in everyone's mind in the 10th city. This is the first time that the bell on the 7th floor of the Refining God Tower has been ringing since the ancient road was opened. As if announcing the blood sword and becoming a new history of the Refining Tower, heaven and earth are congratulating them. The 7th floor, passed. The history of Shinkong Ancient Road will begin to be rewritten at this moment. Everyone in the 10th city was stunned, and then marveled. How Emperor can't help shouting in excitement. From now on, the blood sword will replace the Overlord and become the new record holder in the Refining Tower. He will set a new benchmark for those who come to Refining the Tower in the future. The blood sword will set a new chapter in history. Countless people looked at it with determination, said firmly. Lord Lan's eyes narrowed, a pair of beautiful eyes, and couldn't see what was thinking. Immediately afterwards, the 8th floor of the Refining God Tower began. As time went by, the years of Ijiazi passed. The 8th bell rings again. This time, the bells of the 8th city spread to the 18 cities of the ancient road of Shinkong. In the 8 cities behind the stars, countless top evildoers raised their heads in unison, narrowed their eyes to look at the gray sky, and there was a dignity in their eyes. They know that in the near future, there will be a newcomer with enough strength to compete with them, breaking into Hocheng. At that time, perhaps the pattern of dominance of the 8 major cities in the latter 8 cities will be broken. Outside the Refining Tower, it has turned into a dead silence. The whole number of people are all chills and silent. In the 10th city, all the voices disappeared, only a weird silence. They stared blankly at the Lianshan Pagoda, their mouths open and they could put an egg. Their faces were dull. Next moment, the 10th city is boiling. 8th floor. Refining the Goddess 9. The blood sword has broken through the 8th floor, and will soon be able to reach the summit of the 9-level God Tower. It is rumored that in the 9th floor of the Refining God Tower, there is a gift prepared by the adult himself. Hey, but the gift prepared by the adult himself can hardly imagine how precious it will be. Countless people shouted, "Blood sword, the first person to refine the tower." Someone shouted such words with excitement. But immediately his words were corrected. Lord Master, for the time being, now the blood sword is not only the first person to refine the tower, but also the first person in the top 10 cities. At this moment, everyone is unparalleled to the sword, and all are subject to it. Even Lord Lan, after a burst of radiance in his eyes, shook his head and said to himself, "The guy who died in Tianqi died in his hands, and he did not die." Just when everyone was looking forward to it, Jian Wushuang reached the top of the Refining Tower. The door of the Refining God Tower was opened at this moment. Jian Wushuang's head was covered with black hair, and he stepped out of the Lianshan Tower step by step. His pace stopped on the 8th floor. Did the 9th floor fail? It seems so. Many of the 10th city dominated each other, facing each other. However, the blood sword can reach the 8th floor, which is already very good. Yes, don't forget, the blood sword is only the 5th grade master. The next moment, they looked at Xiang Jianshuang's eyes, full of awe. How Emperor rushed to stride, hugged the sword unparalleled, and said that he was unfavorable. "Master Blood and Blood Sword, you are too strong. I can follow you, I am a blessing for me in my last life." "It's heavy," Jian Wushuang replied with a smile. After speaking, Jian Wushuang looked at Lord Lan on his side, turned his right hand, and a token engraved with the word Starry Sky appeared in his hand. "What?" Lord Lan nodded when he heard the words, and replied, "Yes, this is the customs clearance, you can now enter the 8 cities." Jian Wushuang heard back and said, "Thank you. Don't worry, this is what you got by strength." Lord Lan waved his hand and said unconsciously. Jian Wushuang didn't say much anymore, and looked at Heian Emperor Shen and said, "How EMB, you'll go to Hoboken first. After you get the customs clearance, you can enter Hoboken to find me." The last 8 cities are different from the first 10 cities. In the first 10 cities, as long as the strength is sufficient, Jian Wushuang can take him to any level, but the latter 8 cities must enter the refining tower and get customs clearance. Okay, Lord Bloodsword, I will come to you soon. How Ember dominated his chest and felt for the first time an endless drive. So, hope we can see you again. Jian Wushuang smiled at him, and then strode toward the entrance of the 10th city. Just as he was about to step into the entrance of the passage, some of the 10th city's masters asked, Her Sword, do you dare to ask what trial is in the 7th floor? Jian Wushou stepped in a footstep, thought for a moment, and replied faintly, It's my own way. Everyone heard the words and couldn't help it. Your own way. Waiting for them to ask again, a surge of white light came, and the figure of Jian Wushuang disappeared at the entrance of the 10th city. After a moment, the white light gradually dissipated, and Lord Lan looked at the entrance to the 10th city where the swordless figure had disappeared, and a meaningful light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 42-47. The first is more. Shinkong Ancient Road, at the entrance. A huge cosmic boat blazed from a distance. On this cosmic boat, a banner with the word "To Virtual" was flying like a sail, hunting and squealing against the starry sky. Immediately he saw the door of the spacecraft opened, and a monster with a barbed back and a waist around his back stepped down from the spacecraft step by step. This is the spaceship of the Taishu Temple? Well, is this the person who sent the Shinkong Ancient Road to Taishu Temple? It doesn't look good. This time, the battle between the 8 cities behind the ancient starry sky is probably nothing to do with the temple. Some stay at the entrance to the ancient road of Shinkong all year round and love the praise of the ultimate masters of the major forces, whispering and discussing. However, before they finished speaking, it suddenly turned black, and then a pain came. Huh! The next moment, they had no movement. Too noisy. The prison dragon shook his head and quickly blasted away. With just one palm, he bounced the right hands of the group that ultimately dominated the shoot. Suddenly, at the entrance of Shinkong Ancient Road, many of the ultimate masters saw this scene, their pupils could not help but shrink, and the face was filled with fear. Without a word, they killed the ultimate masters directly. What kind of man is this? Prison Dragon smiled, stepped down, and his body disappeared instantly. The next moment, he appeared before the ultimate masters. You, what do you want to do? The group finally dominated the inner shock. Don't be nervous. The prison dragon squeezed a smile that he thought was kind, stretched his hands on one of the ultimate masters and asked, I won't eat you again. Why are you so nervous? I just want to ask you a question. The ultimate dominated by the captive dragon wrapped his shoulders. He couldn't help but tremble in his heart and said calmly, What do you want to ask? Prison dragon smiled slightly, rolled his right hand, and suddenly a black light mirror appeared. He held up the black mirror and asked, Have you ever seen this person? This is? The ultimate dominated a moment, looking at the black robe and black hair in the black mirror, hesitating, I seem to have seen this man. Oh, when did you see it? Prison Dragon's eyebrows were raised. The ultimate lord heard a little bit and thought back. If I remember well, this person is the Shinkong Ancient Road from a century ago. At that time, the 2 gatekeepers responsible for guarding the ancient road were killed. Then where is this person now? Prison Dragon continued to ask. The ultimate master shrugged when he heard the words and replied, Do you still have to ask? Is it naturally in the ancient sky? Okay, I see. Thank you so much. Prison Dragon smiled back. The ultimate lord heard the words. His heart could not help completely relax. It seems that this person is not so bad at talking. No thanks. The ultimate master waved his hand and said indifferently, No, I have to thank you, so I decided to give you a gift. The prison dragon lowered his head, and a weird arc gradually evoked in the corners of his mouth. Gift? What gift? The ultimate lord heard the words, his eyes lit up, and he immediately became interested. Send you, dead, boom. The prison dragon suddenly raised his head, with a smirk on his face. With his right hand slamming out, he grabbed the head of the ultimate dominator and lifted him up. Do you like this gift? The prison dragon smiled lowly, and the fierce light flashed to the extreme. "No, don't." The ultimate master was terrified. However, before he finished speaking, his head burst instantly like a watermelon. "Huh!" The ultimate lord burst into powder. The prisoner withdrew his hand and looked at the ultimate masters who had been frightened. He reached out and patted their shoulders, squeezing a smile that he thought was kind. He laughed. "What are you doing so nervous? I just passed by." Having said that, the prisoner dragon strode toward the entrance of the Shinkong ancient road passage, and after a few breaths, disappeared into the entrance of the passage. Looking at his disappearing back, many ultimate masters Feng Changshu breathed a sigh of relief. The 11th city of Shinkong ancient road is also the first city of the last 8 cities. After a long dark shuttle, Jian Wushuang's vision gradually brightened. I saw an extremely desolate, dark world in front of him. Here is the last 8 cities? Jian Wu's eyes glanced towards the surrounding area, and he saw that the place where he appeared was a square platform suspended in the air, and around this square platform stood a dozen or so guards with spears. These guards have different clothes, and they do not seem to come from a force. When they saw Jian Wushuang stepping out of the entrance of the passage, a swarm of bees swarmed up. "Sir, we belong to the real forces of His Majesty the Great Emperor of Japan. Should you consider joining? Sir, join our blood god. Sir, we are the great princes who worship the kingdom of God. We are here to recruit talents, and consider joining us? Sir, how do you call it? In the refining tower have you run through several floors?" These guards talked eloquently. Jian Wushuang's brow could not help but wrinkle, and there was a touch of thought in his eyes. He had long heard that the rules of the last 8 cities were quite different from those of the first 10 cities. In the last 8 cities, all the ultimate masters, except the blue man who defended the 10th city, respected those 8 giants. Except for some strong self-confidence in their own strength, almost all others would respect this. The 8 giants survive with breath and attach themselves to the 8 giants, forming various forces. Converging his thoughts, Jian Wushuang faintly replied, "Blood sword, just broke through the 3rd floor of the refining tower." After coming to the 8 cities, Jian Wushuang didn't know the rules of the latter 8 cities. He decided to join one of the forces temporarily to understand the situation. In order to avoid too high-profile attention, Jian Wushuang only claimed to have broken through the first 3 floors of the refining tower. Anyway, there was little communication between the first 10 cities and the last 8 cities. When his detailed information came to the latter 8 cities, that was a long time later. Just broke through the 3rd floor of the refining tower? Suddenly, the disappointment flashed in the eyes of those responsible for recruiting these forces and gradually dissipated. The remaining forces are no longer enthusiastic. "Your blood sword, right? We are the Lord of His Majesty the Overlord. Don't you consider joining our camp?" A burly ultimate lord with a beard asked. There was a moan of light in Jian Wu's eyes, and he nodded and said, "Yes. Okay, Lord Bloodsword, let's go with us." The bearded man finally dominated and gave a hearty smile. Jian Wushuang followed the bearded lord and walked towards a loft in the distance. Chapter 42-48. Second more. Along the way, Jian Wushuang learned through understanding that this beard-bearing ultimate dominator, Shaoshan Dominator, has a strength that is comparable to the invincible dominator placed in the universe, and it is also a resounding Tianjiao existence. However, among the 8 cities that followed, Tianjiao walked on with all the evil spirits, and the strength of Shaoshan was more than enough, so he turned to the Overlord and became one of the 6 leaders. "Blood Sword Brothers, since you have entered His Majesty the Overlord, then we are now our own brothers. I want to come to you and you don't know much about the latter 8 cities, so I will talk to you." Master Shake Mountain said with a smile. "It's troublesome to shake the mountain leader." Jian Wushuang nodded. "First of all, our last 8 cities are different from the first 10 cities. The last 8 cities are connected to each other. As long as you have the customs clearance in your hand, you can go to any city without restrictions. In other words, you can think of the last 8 cities as a small world, and the 8 cities are the 8 states. In the latter 8 cities, almost everyone will rely on one side of the force, because the latter 8 cities are extremely fierce, and if they are accidentally killed, they can hardly gain a foothold in the latter 8 cities. Shake the Mountain Master slowly said. Jian Wushuang heard his words and raised an eyebrow and asked, Shake the Mountain leader, where does this killing start? The leader of Shake Mountain heard a smile and continued, Blood Sword, the last 8 cities have been fighting for a long time. Once everyone stays under a sky, there will always be friction and collision. Fighting is naturally unavoidable. Secondly, it's because of one of the most important reasons, the battle for Fengshan Monument. Fengshan Bay? There was a tinge of doubt in Jian Wu's eyes. He heard these 3 words for the first time. Yes, Fengshan Steel is the most important thing in the latter 8 cities. In the latter 8 cities, there are 99 Fengshan monuments scattered, and Fengshan monuments represent the qualifications to participate in the grand event of the universe. After the Master, only by obtaining the Fengshan monument, will he be able to enter the cosmic event of the universe after 90,000 years. Said Xin Sheng, leader of Shake Mountain. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and suddenly felt in my heart. When I came to the Master of the ancient road of the sky, almost everyone came for the grand event of the universe. From this, we can imagine how fierce the battle for the Fengshan monument will be. They talked and walked, and soon they walked into the distant loft. Not long after entering the attic, a armored guard suddenly hurried over. Shake the Mountain leader, the 12 cities found the Fengshan monument. Lord Overlord invited you to come and see you if there is something. The leader of Shaking Mountain suddenly lost his face, turned his head to Jian Wushuang and said, Blood Sword, wait a minute or two. I'll meet Lord Overlord first, and by the way, I will help you to receive the armor and identity token. You are waiting here. After that, the leader of Shake Mountain followed the Joey and hurried away. Anyway, shake the mountain to lead you first. Jian Wushuang nodded. After the shaking of the mountain led, the attic suddenly became quiet. Jian Wu sat cross-legged, his eyes twinkling. After the 8 cities, he finally knew something. The years passed, and in a flash, a month passed. Jian Wushuang did not waste time, but began to break through the 4th Kendo origin. He slowly closed his eyes and began to immerse himself in the feelings of Kendo. At the ruins of Tai Luo, he swallowed the 9-leaf sword grass and broke through to the 3rd source of Kendo. Then, with the remaining chaotic sword intention of Jubijian Ko, he pushed the origin of the 3rd heavy Kendo all the way to the peak of the 3rd heavy Kendo origin. After that, his understanding of the origin of Kendo stagnated and got stuck in the bottleneck. Until entering the refining tower. Blast Kendo now! Sword unmatched spread his hands. In his palm, a small whirlwind gradually formed, and the sharp sword air shattered the 4 voids. This is Sword Kendo. Immediately after, a ghost figure from Ancient Swordsman appeared behind Jian Wushuang. This is the 5th level of Kendo. Then there was a trace of bloodline in Jian Wu's eyes. The picture before Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly turned into the scene of Fei Hong Xinjiang, who killed the sect of Purgatory. This is the 6th level killing Kendo. 3 major Kendos are pouring out. Oh! Jian Wushuang whispered, and at the same time, the 3 Kendo comprehensions from the refining god's tower slowly merged together, turning into Jian Wushuang's own perception of Kendo. At this point, Jian Wushuang's short board to break through the 4th heavy Kendo was filled. However, this is not the end. And the 7th floor, my own Kendo. The sword Wushuang slowly opened his mouth. In a hurry, the memory of the 7th floor of the refining god tower, like a tide. On the 7th floor, he is against himself. At the 7th floor, Jian Wushuang finally understood why in the first few layers, his power would be sucked away by the void around the refining tower. That's because the refining god tower will simulate a person exactly like him. It's just a pity that the sword unparalleled simulated by the refining god tower lacks one of the most fundamental things. That is the physique as the perfect level of life. That battle Jian Wushuang clearly saw his strengths and weaknesses in Kendo, and finally, using the power of the gods, he killed his simulation body. Boom! There was a muffled sound in Jian Wushuang's body. That stagnant third kendo consciousness has begun to break through. 3 days later. Huh! A shocking sword, centered on Jian Wushuang, burst out. This sword has a sharp edge, as if to chop up the sky and split the chaos, straight up into the sky. Forth come. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes, and the two gods flashed like lightning in the night. Next moment, the sword that rises to the sky converges. Jian Wushuang got up and stood up, and after seeing the breakthrough of the fourth kendo origin, he became more and more sharp, as if he were a peerless fierce soldier, exuding sharp and fierce power. With a big wave of the sword Wushuang, he immediately covered his breath, as if it were no different from before. Just then, there was a rush of footsteps outside the attic. Blood sword. The face-bearded shaking mountain dominated and strode over. He held a black armor on his right hand and handed the sword Wushuangdo. Blood sword, this is the armor of our overlord camp, which is enough to block the full blow of the ultimate master. Put it on, and now I will go to the 13th city, fight for the seal of the gods. It is good. Sword Wushuang did not hesitate. He flipped his right hand and immediately put on the black armor. Blood sword, from then on you are Her Majesty the Overlord, the god armor under the 6th Army, under my command. Now it is not too late, let's set off for the 13 cities immediately. Shen Shan, the leader of the mountain, began to speak. Chapter 42-49. The first is more. After the Lord Shaking Mountain finished speaking, he immediately waved his hands and yelled, 6th Army, come quickly. The sound exploded like a thunder. Suddenly, dozens of figures radiated from all directions. See, Master! The figures sighed. The 63rd city monument appears in the 13th city, and the tyrant has orders. We must take down that mountain monument. Shaking the commander of the mountain, his eyes narrowed and he began to speak. Observe. These dozens of armor guards should be suddenly. Shaking the leader to see the situation, he nodded with satisfaction and continued to say, this time the birth of the Fengshen steel, the people of the other giants will never let go. It will be extremely horrible if you want to kill. You must do well in your heart. Ready. The dozens of armor guards nodded when they heard the words. They could come to this step and naturally understood the reason that chance and danger coexist. All right, let's go now. Shocking the mountain's commander, his footsteps suddenly turned into a streamer, and he spearheaded towards the distance. The dozens of armor guards also rose into the sky, followed by the leader of the shaking mountain. The sword Wushuang is mixed among these dozens of armor guards, and it is not conspicuous. According to his observation, each of these armor guards has the top ultimate dominating combat power, and should be the best among the top ultimate dominators. And that shaking the mountain commander is the level of almost invincible domination. Then the 8 cities, they really hide and lie. Jian Wushuang sighed a little. You know, in the universe, the top ultimate dominator is not common. I am afraid that a large star domain, after a long time, will be born a top ultimate dominator. And this ancient starry sky is indeed the place where the entire universe dominates the fighting power. On the weekdays, the top ultimate dominator who shouts the wind and rains and covers the sky with his hands can only be used as an ordinary armor in the next 8 cities. Newcomer, this is your first time participating in the Battle of Fengshenbai, right? You will stand behind me, don't run around, you know? Just when Jian Wushuang was thinking, a burly ultimate master said next to him. Okay, thank you. Jian Wushuang heard his words converge and smiled at him. The ultimate master nodded and said indifferently, everyone is a faction. It's very kind to say thank you. My name is Dong Xian, what do you call it? Blood sword. Sword Wushuang replied. Oh, blood sword, I think you are born. It should be the 8 cities after you just arrived? At the beginning, in the 10th city, you broke into the 1st floor? Dong Xian asked. I didn't make it high, just barely past the 3rd floor. Jian Wushuang replied with a smile. 3rd floor? Master Dong Xian raised an eyebrow and then groaned. The 3rd floor is indeed a little worse, but fortunately, you joined our overlord camp. Otherwise, if you join other camps, only afraid to be reduced to cannon fodder. After a pause, the master of Dongxian continued to say, "Blood sword, after the battle to seal the monument will begin, you must remember to hide behind me, otherwise it is very likely that you will die, understand?" Jian Wushuang heard the words and nodded indifferently. He could see that the words spoken by Dongxian did not look down on him, but rather meant something. The two said, while following the leader of Shaoshan, they blasted towards Fengshanbai. They soon passed 2 cities to the 13th city. When it arrives, they all stop. Shaking, the leader of the mountain took a wave at the forefront, and everyone stopped suddenly. I saw in front of them, a huge stone monument appeared in front of them, and beside the stone monument, it was already surrounded by people, facing each other, a picture of a tense sword. His Majesty the Great King of the Great Kingdom, His Majesty the Great King of the Sun Kingdom, His Majesty the Holy Land of the 9 Stars. This time the Majesty of the 9 Giants came to third, and am afraid there will be a fierce battle later. Retreat. And standing at the forefront of the shaking mountain leader, his face also became solemn and solemn. "Let's go." Shocking Mountain Commander took a deep breath, said with a deep voice, and then took the lead from the air. "Is the Overlord coming?" Next to the stone monument, a middle-aged man wearing heavy armor and holding Fong Tianhua halberd raised an eyebrow. A large flag was planted next to them, and a round of scorching big sun was drawn, and when you wanted to come, it was the Lord of the Great Sun God Kingdom. "Shake the mountain, it's been a long time, have you been hurt?" Among the 9-star Holy Land, a bald man in a red robe looked at the Lord of Shaking Mountain with a smile. On the other hand, the commander of the Kingdom of God is a braided man with a double axe and a naked upper body. When he saw Shake Mountain, he gave a cold hum and did not speak. "You are all here, can I not come?" Shanshan Commander looked at them lightly and said, "Well, now that the people who should be here are here, let's talk nonsense, we are going to ask for the Kingdom of God." The braided man with a double axe snorted again, and his eyes were impatient. "Huge God, what are you? When will it be your turn to speak here?" The bald man in a red robe sneered sneerfully. "Autumn leaves. You look for death." The braided big man, known as the giant puppet god, heard a flash of anger on his face, raised his axe, and slashed away towards the man in the red robe bald. "Follow the Kingdom of God, kill me." The fierce light flickered in his eyes, and a raging divine power on the double axe gushed out, splitting his head towards the head of the bald man in the red robe. This giant prince looks like an ultimate master who is almost invincible. After his words fell, dozens of ultimate masters behind him immediately rushed out and killed towards the 9-star Holy Land to which the red leaves belonged. When Hongya saw this, her eyes narrowed suddenly, and she sneered, "Jumbo, it seems you really forgot to be hunted down by this seat 20,000 years ago." After finishing speaking, Hongya took a handful of right hand, a scimitar suddenly appeared in his hand, sideways avoided the chop of the giant puppet god, and then a shocking sword cut out and swept towards the giant puppet god. On the other side, he wears a heavy helmet and holds the leader of the great sun god kingdom with Fong Tianhua halberd. He twists his neck expressionlessly, looks down at Shaoshan, and speaks indifferently, "I have heard of Shaoshan's leader long ago. Feudo Buddha, prestige, take advantage of today, let's take a good look at it." He held Fong Tianhua's right hand to draw a halberd, and the halberd's tip suddenly stroked a cold mang. After taking a deep breath, the leader of Shake Mountain said only one word, "Kill." After speaking, the leader of Shake Mountain, like the sharp knife, took the lead in rushing towards the great sun god kingdom. "Blood sword, it's time we came on, you follow me." Dong Xian's eyes flickered, and when he turned his right hand, a weird head ring knife appeared in his hand, followed by the leader of the shaking mountain, and looted towards the great sun god kingdom camp. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, did not use the Wu weapon sword, and followed behind Dong Xian Lord. A battle kicked off. Chapter 4250. Second more. Kill. Suddenly, the sound of shouting and killing, the surge of swordsmanship and swordsmanship surged into the sky. From the beginning, the battle went into a feverish state. The leader of Shaking the Mountain directly found the leader of the great sun god kingdom wearing a heavy helmet and holding a Fangtian painting halberd. The two are almost invincible levels of the master. Under the confrontation, they will directly circle the area within 100 feet as a forbidden area, and the aftermath of the battle will be swept away in all directions. Breaking new ground. The leader of the great sun god kingdom, with a cold drink, suddenly stroked the sky in his hand, with the force of gravity, slashing down towards the leader of Shaking Mountain. No motion. Looking at the halberd, which seems to cut off the sun and the moon, shakes the mountain's leader, his face sinks, the whole body glows with light gold, and his feet are as if they are rooted on the ground. The icy halberd is not able to shake him. Since, are you going to be beaten? The leader of the great sun god kingdom looked indifferent, stomped on his right foot, and suddenly came down with a halberd. The other side. Dong Xian dominated the weird dove's head ring knife and ran into the camp of the great sun god kingdom. In this battle, there is no rule, only the heart-to-heart fight of ultimate on both sides. Surging. Countless magical techniques have exploded. If the outside world and the two forces fight, it is enough to burst a galaxy. Even in this ancient sky, there are rules and constraints, and the space is extremely stable. A tremor blasted the earth and blasted out numerous craters. Jian Wushuang followed Dong Xian's master, but there was no danger. From time to time, he hacked out a sword mang to help Dong Xian's master to block the dark arrows coming from all around. Blood sword, it looks like you're fine. Master Dong Xian looked back at Jian Wushuang and smiled. Sloppy. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. At this time, my lord's little cubs die. A big man with two beards and a naked top, holding a big knife, slashed towards Dong Xian's master. The dreaded Swordsman, mixed with strong cosmic laws, screams high in the sky. Remember, the leader of the fourth army of the great Nico kingdom who killed you, His Majesty Arhua, Liang Yi is the master. When Dong Xian was in control, his face suddenly appeared dignified. He had noticed this person for a long time, and he was the strongest under the command of the great kingdom of gods. For a while, His Majesty, the overlord who fell in his hands, was the ultimate master, and he had no less than 3. Blood sword, hide behind me, be careful. Master Dong Xian took a deep breath, grasped the dove head and ring knife in his hand, and drank, Lan Lei Chop. Boom! Suddenly, electric snakes were wrapped around the dove's head ring knife in the hands of Dong Xian's master, shooting 10 feet of thunder, and thunder condensed on the tip of the knife. Cut! Master Dong Xian's expression was somber, and his right foot was stomped hard. The whole man suddenly rose into the sky, and the horizontal knife split towards Liang Er's master. The two swords slammed together. Ha! The thunder exploded, and where the two played against each other, a light wave exploded directly, swinging towards the surroundings. Liang dominated, and Dong Xian's dominated. Oh, you're good. Liang Er dominated his brow, slightly surprised. Dong Xian's expression was dignified. He said nothing, but stared at Liang Yi. He knew in his heart that he had to be dragged, otherwise no one could control him once he rushed into their camp. Similar to this kind of team battle, often a strong person can tilt the situation, and the leader of the Shaking Mountain is glued with the leader of the Arakawa. If they can't stop Liang Er dominating, the consequences are unthinkable. But that's just it. Liang Er dominated with a sneer and killed again with a knife. The cold black blade is like a serpent swallowing the sun, and it instantly turns into thousands of roads, coming like a storm. Blood sword, be careful. Master Dong Xian bit his teeth, turned back to Jian Wushuang, and then slammed his head against Liang Er. Ha! The two men fought 1,000 times in an instant, and the cold sword light collided with the thunder light on the dove head ring knife, and the exploding earth slammed. It can be seen that when it comes to combat power, the dominion of Dong Xian is inferior to the strength of the dominion of Liang Yi. Under the sword of dominion of Liang Yi, he can only continuously retreat backwards, only with the force of parry, without the ability to fight back. However, it is very good that the master of Dong Xian has deep spiritual powers. After a short while, this master of Liang Yi really can't help him. This is exactly the purpose of Dong Xian. He didn't seek to kill Liang Er, but only dragged him on for a while and a half. When the victory over the mountain was divided, the battle would be finalized. Lord Liang clearly saw this, and his eyes flashed, and he sneered, "Little cub, wait for me to slaughter other trash of your overlord first, and then come to settle accounts with you." After that, his eyes flickered and he searched for the target again. Immediately after, his eyes stopped on Jian Wushuang. "There's still garbage in the muddy waters, so let's start with you." Liang dominated with a grin, and immediately stepped hard and turned into a black on, over-dominated the cave master who was breathing heavily, and slid towards Jian Wushuang. Blood Sword www. Novel. Be careful. Dong Xian's face suddenly changed, and he shouted at Jian Wushuang behind him. What he feared most happened. He himself was very strenuous to deal with the Lord of Liang. Where can he spare the effort to save others? "It's you, kid, let's die." Liang dominated with a low smile, and the sword in his hand turned into a black python that swallowed the sky, severely chopped down towards the sword Wushuang. Dong Xian's face suddenly became ugly. In the distance, the leader of Shake Mountain also noticed this scene. "Boy, if you want to survive in the last 8 cities, this is what you have to go through. Ask for blessings." Shocking Mountain leader shook his head and whispered to himself, and then fought with leader Arakawa again. Jian Wushuang looked at this slashed sword and suddenly sighed. "Why come to kill me? Call out." Jian Wushuang's right hand swayed slightly, and Wu Wei's magic sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Immediately, Jian Wushuang raised his right hand, and looked at the sneer-spoken Liang Eru, calmly spit out 2 words, "Kaiyan." The words fell, there were no gorgeous swordsmanships, no rushing swordsmanship. There was only one of the calmest sword chi, shot from the Wu weapon sword, and looted towards Liang Yi's lord. After breaking through the origin of the 4th kendo, the sword skill of sword unparalleled has suddenly reached the point of returning to its original state. Except for the invincible dominator, a near-invincible dominator like Liang Er is not even enough for him to take a serious shot. Haha, is this soft sword spirit being embroidered with needles? Liang Yi dominated disdain and laughed, facing Jian Wushuang's open sword. He didn't care. Chapter 4251. The first is more. Seeing this soft sword, even Dong Xian dominated the heart. He couldn't help sinking to the bottom of the valley. Well, it's a pity. He sighed in his heart, but he immediately turned his face on. After entering the 8 cities for so many years, he has long been used to life and death. The sky is proud, and what he should do now is to restore his divine power immediately and wait for the Lord of Liang to stop. Just when everyone regretted it, the sword of Wuqing, who had just arrived, was about to die. Anomalies have happened. I saw Jian Wushuang's open-air sword chi is actually like a long river, getting bigger and bigger. At the beginning, the sword has countless swords, only to be as slender as hair. However, in just a few breaths, the sword's unparalleled opening of the sword is like a galaxy, sweeping the world, running through the sun and the moon, carrying endless roaring power, horizontal coming. The turbulent sword gas swayed the quartet and turned into a shocking sun and moon sword, passing by in the air. The demon cried, the voice of the Buddha groaning from the Wu weeping sword. For a moment, this Jianmang attracted all the attention of the audience. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the sword across the world. How is that possible? Liang dominated with shock, and a startled expression appeared in his eyes. Then he took a deep breath, a sharp light in his eyes, and a low voice. It looks like I'm looking down on you. Mystery, broken mountain, boom. Immediately, the black sword in the hands of Liang dominated, and mysterious runes sprang up in circles, which was directly enlarged by 100 feet. The power was not weaker than Jian Wushuang, and he was chopped towards Jian Wushuang's Kaitian Jianmang. Boy, die. He looked at Xiang Jinshuang hardly, his eyes bursting. The sword is unparalleled, and his expression is indifferent. The end, from the moment he issued his sword, was already doomed. Boom! Kaitian Jianmang, and the broken sword door dominated by Liang Yi suddenly collided. Just when everyone thought that there would be a shocking war between Jian Wushuang and Liang Er. What a shocking scene. The majestic broken mountain sword mount, after encountering Kaitian sword mount, turned out to be like cold ice hitting hot oil. It didn't even hold out for a while and began to fall apart. Click and wipe. Kan Zhenmang crushed and broke the broken mountain swordman all the way, and then split into his body in the terrifying eyes of Lianger dominating. Ha! A terrible explosion exploded, setting off a white sky. After Bailang dissipated, in the void, there was the slightest figure of Liang Er's domination. There was only one large black knife broken into two, suspended in the void quietly. A sword comes out, Liang Er die. Suddenly, everyone in the audience turned their heads, opened their mouths, and stared at Jian Wushuang. Blood. Blood sword. Dong Xian dominated the whole person stiff and petrified. Looking at Jian Wushuang, he swallowed his throat subconsciously. The one that forced him to fight back and was regarded by him as a confidant who was enough to affect the war situation was dominated by Liang Yi, so he was killed by a sword? Didn't even leave slag? Just lucky. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly at him. Is this a fluke? Master Dong Xian was stunned, and then he slammed all over his body, slammed heavily on Jian Wushuang's chest and grinned, "Blood sword, your boy is hidden deep enough." Jian Wushuang smiled, no longer pretending to refute. Master Dong Xian took a deep breath and turned to look at the frightening Dajin kingdom, with a smile on his face, and said loudly, "Kill with me." Suddenly, without Liang Er's dominion, the rest of the great sun god kingdom dominated, and it was totally unbeatable. Coupled with the fear of the sword unparalleled, the soldiers killed were defeated. Within a few moments, the great sun god kingdom camp directly defeated. And the leader of the mountain and the leader of the Arakawa who fought in the distance also noticed the scene. Good boy! Shaking the mountain leader to see Xiang Jianwushuang, his eyes burst out and he sighed loudly. The Arakawa dominated, his face was extremely gloomy. Wasteless waste. He murmured coldly, not knowing who he was talking about. Immediately, he took a deep breath and looked at the leader of Shanshan. Shake the mountain, this time you are lucky, this monument, I don't want to be. When the words fell, he looked at Xiang Jianwushuang coldly, and his eyes filled with murderousness. Boy, you're fine. I remember you. You can rest assured that I will come to you. Although the words of admiration were in his mouth, his tone was extremely cold. The ultimate dominator present, hearing this, couldn't help but hesitate. Okay, you are welcome to come to me anytime. Jian Wu's eyes did not evade to look at that Arakawa dominated, smiling slightly. The Arakawa dominator heard the words, and immediately burst into anger and laughed. Okay boy, you are arrogant now. I hope you can laugh next time you meet me. After the Lord Arakawa had finished speaking, he immediately flung his sleeves, regardless of the ultimate lord's life and death, who followed him, blasted away with a cold face. Soon, the master of Arakawa turned into a black spot and disappeared into the sky. The leader of the shaking mountain was relieved, and then strode toward the sword unparalleled. Lord Master! Jian Wushuang arched his hand. Shock Mountain nodded his head, and then re-examined Jian Wushuang with a strange look. After this battle of sealing the monument, you follow me to meet the Overlord. Jian Wushuang heard the words, groaned, then nodded and said, okay. After shaking the mountain, Wen Yen smiled, and then looked up into the distance. Over there, the battle between the 9-star Holy Land and the great blessing of the Kingdom of God gradually closed. Compared to the battle between Jian Wushuang and the Great Divine Kingdom, the contention between the Jiuxing Holy Land and the Great Blessing Kingdom is much more fierce. The giant urn holding the double axe looked like this, and the whole person was almost peeled off by the red leaves. I saw Hong Ye's hands and 5 fingers, a bunch of red threads entangled, grabbed directly, deprived a large part of the divine power of God's power, strange and cruel to the extreme. Grandma, I said, it's not your turn to be wanton here. Hong Ye stepped into the void and looked down at the giant salamander, disdainfully speaking. Red leaves. The giant puppet gasped for breath, His body was in a state of dilapidation, and there were defects everywhere. He looked hard at Hongye, his eyes full of anger, and growled loudly. The incompetence of the weak is furious. Hongye shook her head, and then stepped on it, turning it into a red-on, and killing it toward the giant god. The giant magpie is about to fall. The leader of Shaoshan watched this scene and squinted his eyes. Immediately he turned to look at Jian Wushuang, Dong Xian, and others, and Xinxing said, "You are ready. We are bound to get this monument." Chapter 42-52. Second more. I saw the battle between giant princes and red leaves, and at the beginning, it became a one-sided situation. Hongye's figure is erratic and weird, like a red line, roaming around the giant prince. Hoo-hoo! The giant salamander roared low, the double axe in his hand widened, and split wildly. However, Hongye's body is too weird. After the giant axe's hands were chopped on Hongye by the axe, Hongye's body was broken up and reorganized again. Brainless man! Hongye sneered, the red snake entangled between the 5 fingers, and each claw grabbed was a part of the magic power of the giant puppet god. No matter how angry and roaring the giant puppet is, there is no way to hold the red leaves. After a few moments, the voice of the giant puppet gradually weakened. Sure enough, as the leader of Shake Mountain said, the giant salamander was defeated by the red leaves, and even had no chance to escape. He was stripped alive by the red leaves and died. A near-invincible master, so he died next to the Fengshan monument. The ultimate master of His Majesty the Great Kingdom of God was suddenly guilty. Some chose to take refuge in Hongye, and some were killed by the ultimate master of Hongye. After a while, beside the Fengshan monument, only Hongye dominated the side, and Jian Shaoshan, the leader of the Shaking Mountain, was left. Whirring! A gust of cold wind blew through, blowing up the jerseys of the two sides. The leader of Shake Mountain sank, and when he was about to start the war, Hongye waved his hand and interrupted with a smile. "Shake the hill, we have only experienced the war on both sides. It is boring to fight like this. Why not change our gameplay?" Changing another game? Shaking the leader frowned and said, "What game?" Hongye laughed. "Apart from you and me, we sent 3 men to dominate the strong, let them one-on-one, and then 3 games and 2 wins, how?" Shanshan commander heard the words. A flash of thought flashed in his eyes. He agreed with Hongye's proposal. This will avoid more casualties. Second, if he loses one-on-one, he thinks he won't win even if he starts a full-scale war. To the red leaves, he confessed that he was not sure of victory. After thinking for a while, Shaking Mountain leader Shin-Yi nodded and said, "Yes." When Hongye saw this, his mouth suddenly drew a smile, and said, "Shake the mountains, then we will prepare a time for each joss stick, select 3 masters from your majesty, and then start?" Shaking the Mountain leader naturally has no objection. After nodding his head, he turned to look at His Majesty. "Who are you going to fight?" Shaking the Mountain led his eyes and glanced over from His Majesty, and he began to speak with a deep voice. "I'll wait. I'm willing to fight." Dong Xian's master and others should be astonished that Jian Wushuang is also in it. Shocking Mountain leader saw this, and there was a moment of relief in his eyes. He glanced at His Majesty's face one by one, and then fixed his face on Dong Xian's face and said, "Dong Xian, how about you come to the first game? I am honored." Dong Xian dominated his hands. The leader of Shake Mountain nodded, and looked again at another master with a spear and a square-faced eyebrow, hesitated, and said, "Master of Earth Wrath, how about you come to the second game?" The Rage Master nodded and heard a word, stepped out of the crowd, and said in a deep voice, "Lead in peace, the Rage must do his best." "Okay." Shock Mountain Commander nodded comfortably, and then began to pick the third candidate. His gaze swept from His Majesty's face one by one, and finally fixed on Jian Wushuang's face. Just when Jian Wushuang thought that Shanshan leader would choose to play on his own, Shanshan leader hesitated for a moment, and said, "The third candidate is to be determined for the time being. Anyway, 3 wins and 2 wins, maybe there is no need for a third." Field, the war situation was directly locked. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Since Shanshan leader does not need him for the time being, he will naturally not put his face together and force a fight. Yixiang Xiang passed quickly, shaking the mountain leader and turning to look at Hong Ye, and he said loudly, "Hong Ye, our candidate has been finalized." Hong Ye nodded, and stretched out a finger. It seemed to smile but said with a smile, "Shake the mountain, the candidates on my side have been finalized, and we have only one person on our side." "Alone? Are you serious?" The face of Shaoshan commander suddenly sank, and there was a flash of anger on the faces of Dong Xian and others. "Hong Ye thinks that only one person can make a dozen and three?" Hong Ye heard a smile and said with a negative hand, "Naturally, as long as the three of you can defeat him, I will give in." "Zhang Feng, come out." The voice fell to the ground. A middle-aged vicissitudes man in a commoner's clothing, not astonishing in appearance, holding a blue Excalibur in his hand, and walked out from behind Hong Ye with no expression. "Who is this person?" Suddenly, Dong Xian and other people saw the situation, all frowned and looked at each other. The latter 8 cities said that they are not small, and that they are not big, basically they have a name and a surname, and they are masters of superior strength. They have all heard of them. The master, called Tibetan Seal, had never seen it before. The leader of Shaoshan looked at the middle-aged vicissitudes man named Tibetan Seal. Somehow, there was a bad feeling in his heart. "Dong Xian, be careful." He instructed Dong Xian, the leader of Dong Xian, and nodded his head solemnly. Since this person can be entrusted by Hong Ye with a heavy task, he will naturally prove his strength. Outstanding. The men on both sides of the Red Leaf leader and the Rock Mountain leader stepped back, giving enough space to serve as a platform, so that the masters on both sides could kill freely. Zhang Feng stepped to the center step by step, and glanced indifferently at the cave master and others, and said, "Let's go together." As soon as this remark came to an end, like the same stone stirred up 1,000 layers of waves, Dong Xian dominated and others' faces were full of anger. The arrogant Dong Xian dominated with a grin, then flew out and blasted towards that Tibetan Seal. Mystery, Lan Legion. Boom! The electric snakes were entwined, and the thunderball converged on the dove head ring knife in the hands of the master of the cave. At the beginning, the master of Xian directly used the peerless skills at the bottom of the box. "Dead to me!" Dong Xian dominated the roar, and the thunderballs on the dove's ring knife rolled down and hacked away towards that seal. "Ha!" Thunders exploded, and the whole house was incandescent. In the incandescent electric light, Zhang Feng slowly raised his head and looked at Dong Xian indifferently, saying, "Abandoned chicken dog." "Ha!" With a shocking sword slamming, the blue Excalibur in the hands of Zhang Feng suddenly emerged. A forest blue sword light suddenly cut out like a horse, stunning to the extreme, extremely fast. This sword light is like a white dragon out of the sea, with a clear sword groaning and howling, fiercely chopped to the dominion of Dong Xian. Before Jian Guang touched Dong Xian, the sharp sword chi had already wiped out all the thunders that had exploded. Instantly, Dong Xian's face changed. Chapter 42-53. The first is more. This? Dong Xian dominated his body, and as soon as he stepped, he planned to step back and pull away. However, no chance. Zhang Feng shook his head. The words fell, and the sword light was perfect, directly blasting Ray Mang apart. Except for the lightness of Jian light being a little dim, he continued to blast towards the master of the cave. Ha! Suddenly, that sword light stabbed in the position of Dong Xian's dominating chest cavity severely, penetrating his body directly. With a muffled sound, Dong Xian dominated the whole person like a broken sackcloth bag, drew an arc in the air, and fell into the distance. Dong Xian's dominion overwhelmed the great power of his body, and his face became pale to the extreme. This sword almost killed him. Dong Xian. Shocking Mountain Master's face was startled, and he strode immediately next to Master Dong Xian, reached out and lifted him up, and poured his divine power into Dong Xian's Master God's body, helping him to wipe out the remaining sword energy. Under the power of shaking the mountain, Dong Xian's injury gradually recovered, his pale complexion also improved, but he was still yellow. Master, leader, I'm sorry I lost in the first battle and lived up to your optimism. Master Dong Xian stood up holding on to his body and said a little bit hard. Shut up and take good care of the gods. This seed is still waiting for you to kill with me in the future. As for defeat, this is not your problem. The leader of Shake Mountain interrupted him, then took a deep breath, glanced at the Tibetan seal and immediately looked at Hongye, and said, Hongye, you are really attentive. This Tibetan seal, I am afraid that there is already an almost invincible level. Do you have commanding power? Hongye Wenyan smiled slightly and replied, Shake the Mountain, you don't need to care what level of combat power he is, as long as he is dominated by my majesty, it is in line with the rules, you understand? The leader of Shaking the Mountain heard a heavy hum, and knew in his heart that Hongye's words could not be refuted. As long as the Tibetan seal was under the authority of Hongye, even if he was invincible, he could not do anything. Taking a deep breath, Shaking the Mountain to Li Shen said, Hongye, this is a test that we admit defeat. You can take this monument. After that, the leader of Shake Mountain planned to lead the team to leave. He asked himself, the strength of these ultimate masters under his hands was not as good as that of Zongfeng, and even if he went up again, it would only be a free life. In this case, the ending is the same, it is better to give up the monument directly. Although Shanshan was unwilling to lead the leader, the situation was stronger than others and he could only bow his head. As Jian Wushuang followed Shanshan's command to leave, Hongye suddenly said, Slow. Okay. He shook the mountain and heard the words, and looked back at Hongye. His face was not so good. Hongye, we have already given up. What else do you want to do? I saw Hongyepi smiled and said without a smile, Shake the mountain, but our rule is a 3-match test. Now that the test is not finished, how can we leave? After a pause, Hongye continued, I hate the most in my life, but the one who doesn't follow the rules. After he finished speaking, the ultimate master behind him was full of divine power, faintly encircling the formation and pulling it away, as if shaking the mountain leader to dare to take another step, he had to get up and attack. Red Leaf, you are too much. Shake the mountain to look at Hongye, his eyes are extremely cold. Hongye looked down at the leader of Shaoshan, jokingly, and said, Shake the mountain, I've given you a chance, otherwise it will really fight. Do you think they can go out alive? The leader of Shake Mountain took a deep breath, pondered for a moment, and then slowly said, Okay, then continue. After speaking, he looked at the domineering Earthwrath Dominator, contemplatively exhorted, Earthwrath, you fought with that Tibetan seal, and you just confessed to it, and kept your life. The Lord of Earth Fury nodded, and calmly returned, Okay. He is not a headless man, and he can naturally see that this hidden power has reached the commanding level, which is almost invincible, and he is not an opponent at all. Let's get started. Hongye smiled and waved. Suddenly, the war began again. Earth Fury dominated the pace, step by step towards the middle of the open space. After closing his eyes and holding a sword, Zhangfeng opened his eyes slowly, and when he looked at the Fury Master, he said lightly, You won't have the luck of that person just now. The Lord of Earth Fury frowned when he heard the words, wondering what it meant. However, he did not intend to think deeply, following the explanation of the leader of the mountain, and said, Zongfeng, I will lose this battle. However, he didn't wait for him to finish. Want to admit defeat? Zongfeng gave a cold smile and pulled out the blue Excalibur in his hand, and when he stepped on it, he turned into a sword light and came predatory. Then I have to ask the sword in my hand, it won't agree. Boom! The speed of hiding and closing was extremely fast, and the sword came directly, turning into a dazzling sword light. The pale blue sword strangled the quartet, and fiercely slashed towards the Lord of Fury. You! The face of Lord Fury suddenly changed dramatically. I didn't expect that I had confessed it, and this Tibetan seal still refused to let him go. Red Leaf, what do you mean? Shaking the leader to see this, he was also furious and looked at Hongye hardly. And Hongye just smiled slightly and didn't respond at all. Mystery, Starfall. The Lord of Earth Fury roared, and the spear tip in his hand exploded a little, and went toward Zhangfeng. Earth Fury dominated the spear tip in his hand and hid the swords turned into Tibetan seals. Then, he saw that the spear started from the spear tip and began to break up little by little. The gap between the two is really too big. After seeing this spear split, in the horrified eyes of the Lord of Earth Fury, the liver and gallbladder were split, Zhangfeng sneered, and the blue Excalibur was split again in his hand, and the Lord of Earth Fury was split in half. Do not. The Lord of Earth Fury shouted sternly. However, the Tibetan seal did not show any sympathy to his subordinates, and the sharp sword energy broke out again, directly smashing the body that was split into two halves by the Lord of Earth Fury. Shaking the mountain leader to see the situation, suddenly burst into tears, a rush of anger straight to the top of his head. And that Tibetan seal then put the sword to stand, his face sneered away. Zhangfeng, my majesty the Lord has conceded, why do you still want to kill him? Shanshan commander looked at Zhangfeng deadly, panting heavily with anger. Zhangfeng gave him a faint glance and said indifferently, he is weak and doesn't blame me. It's not good. Shocking the mountain, the leader was very angry and smiled, and the blue tendons on his forehead were twisted, and he said, Hidden seal, you bully my majesty what your master is capable of, and if there is something we will come to the game with us. Stranhao? Chapter 4254. Second more. Zhangfeng heard the words, his eyes narrowed suddenly, his eyes stared directly at the shaking leader, and he sneered and said, Why dare not? Before he finished speaking, Hongya smiled and waved his hands and said, Okay, Tibetan seal, the others have shaken the mountain, but they have experienced the chaos era and are the ultimate masters, but you can't match it. The words fell, and Hongya looked at the leader of Shaoshan's side and continued, Shake the mountain, and quickly send a third candidate to the test. Obviously, for this test, Hongya already has a winning hand. The leader of Shake Mountain was so gloomy that he understood that if they wanted to go out alive, they could only follow the rules of Hongya. Take a deep breath, shake the leader of the mountain and turn his head, looking at his majesty's ultimate master. In his eyes, everyone could not help but shrink his head and step back. Hidden in 2 battles and 2 wins, the master of Dongxian and the Lord of Earth Fury were wounded and killed. The fierce prestige was too great. They were already scared of fear and fear in their hearts. Is anyone willing to go to war? Shen Shan Commander Shin Xing asked. Many of the ultimate crowd dominate you and look at me and look at you, all are silent, like a chill. They are killing for overlords. That's right, but it doesn't mean that they will die if they are known to play. Shaking the leader to see the situation, a heart sinking constantly, could not help but laugh bitterly, but did not blame them. Zhangfeng, you see, his majesty is the master, and no one dares to fight anymore. The leader of Shaoshan took a deep breath and turned to look at the martyr. Oh! Zhangfeng raised his eyebrows and twitched his lips, saying, Your Majesty King, are all such a group of cowardly rats? Shaking his head boringly, Zhangfeng's eyes narrowed, and he swept across the faces of the ultimate masters behind Shanshan leader and said, Since this is the case, let me choose the objects myself. Facing the eyes of Zhangfeng, many of the ultimate dominators were all cold in their hearts, and could not help taking a step back, as if they were afraid of being picked. Seeing the seal, the crickets in the eyes are more prosperous. At this time, his gaze rested on the grim young man with black hair and dark hair. In his eyes, everyone took a step back unconsciously, but this person still stood there lightly, with no expression on his face, and could not see joy and sadness. Who are you? Zhangfeng Rao asked with interest. Blood sword. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and replied slightly. Why don't you see me? Zhangfeng asked with amusement. Why should I retreat? Jian Wushuang asked with an expression of unhappiness and sorrow. Haha, interesting. Zhangfeng heard the words, and suddenly felt like a funny joke, twisted his neck and said, Blood sword, it's you are the third war candidate. As soon as this remark came to an end, many of the ultimate masters who shook the mountain behind him were all shocked, and looked towards Sword Jianshuang with sympathy. The leader of Shaking Mountain even said, Blood sword, you can defeat Liang Air, You have done enough, you can play without fighting. Jian Wushuang smiled and said, no matter. When the leader of Shanshan heard the words and wanted to say anything, he saw that Zongfeng opened his mouth and provoked, blood sword, I see that you have a sword in your hand, and you want to come to be a sword repair too. Grinding, what can be done? Jian Wushuang heard a faint smile, looked at Zongfeng and said, you just want to fight me? After hearing the words, Zongfeng sneered and said, blood sword, let's get out of the way quickly. Maybe I'm in a good mood, and I can point you to a few words on the sword. After a pause, Zongfeng seemed to think of something and added a sentence. Blood sword, you are also a sword repairer, and you should know the origin of kendo, right? To remind you, my understanding of the origin of kendo has broken through to the first place of kendo. Triple. Guide me? The origin of kendo is triple? Jian Wushuang could not help feeling a little dumbfounded, then shook his head and sighed lightly. Then as you wish. The words fell, and the sword unparalleled stepped out. Shaking the leader to see the situation, knowing that it can no longer be changed, he had no choice but to say, blood sword, this Tibetan seal is much stronger than that, and you must not be stubborn. Once you find that it is not the Tibetan seal, I immediately confess. As long as you give in, I will protect you. Jian Wushuang nodded his head, indicating clearly. Zongfeng watched the sword Wushuang coming out, and his mouth could not help but ask, blood sword, are you ready? Jian Wushuang did not answer, but calmly said, hidden seal, I only have 3 swords. If you can take my 3 swords, I will give in. As soon as this voice came to an end, everyone in the audience was stunned, and they looked at the magic swordsman, wondering if they heard it wrong. Even the red leaves with smiles on their faces were smiling. Do you know what this kid is saying? Arrogance. Zongfeng immediately smiled in anger, no hesitation in his eyes, stepped hard, and the whole man rose into the sky. Mystery, Jianhua Shuiyue. Boom! A sharp sword light reached the extreme, and it was split from the blue Excalibur in the hands of Tibetan seal. The horrible sword spread with coercion and spread around. Under this sword light, everyone was in the heart. Fine cold sweat appeared on the forehead. Next moment, Zongfeng smiled coldly, sharp sword light in his hand fiercely chopped towards Jian Wushuang. Go to hell! Facing this sword that came from the sky, Jian Wushuang's black hair fluttered, his expression was calm, and he spit out 3 words, first sword. With a light noise, a blood-colored swordman, with the sword unparalleled chopping off. This sword is simple, without any power, but as if it were natural, without any flaws, as it should be with swordsmanship. The blood-colored swordman soon met the sharp swordlight in the hands of Zongfeng. However, it is such an ordinary sword, but it is like destroying and dying, and instantly splits the glorious sword light hidden in the flower into a fan powder. Just like an egg hitting a stone, facing Jian Wushuang's sword, the sword light couldn't stop it at all, and it broke up. How can it be? Zhang Feng's pupils contracted violently, exclaiming, Huh! The blood-colored sword mantle fell on Zongfeng, and he directly slashed Zongfeng from the air, crossed an arc in the air, shot it backwards, and fell to the ground, throwing a large pit on the ground. Countless fumes rose up, Tibetan cape radiated, gray heads and soiled faces, unable to remain half calm, and his face was extremely frightened. The blue Excalibur in his hand showed a few fissures in his hair. How could this be? How could this be? He half knelt on the ground, raised his head and stared at Xiang Wushuang, his eyes full of fear and disbelief. He is an almost invincible lord of kendo. Nothing is impossible. It can't be just your ignorance. Jian Wushuang shook his head, his expression calm, and said again, Second sword. Chapter 4255. The first is more. Second sword. Open the sky. After the sword Wushuang sentence fell, the Wu crying sword in his hand trembled tens of thousands of times in an instant, a sword on gradually condensed, and then, like a rolling river, carrying a roaring muffled sound, rolled towards the Tibetan seal. At the beginning, Fong was only the thickness of his hair. As the sword's air continually condensed, It gradually became the thickness of his arms. When the sword was really empty, it was already like an upside-down sky. The sun and the moon were connected, and it was amazing pole. Huang Huang Tianwei, sighted with a sword. At this moment, everyone looked up at the sword, with a terrified expression. Swordsmanship. This is the real sword repair. Who is this person? Why has it not been known before? This sword immediately caught everyone's eyes. Even the red leaves and the leader of the shaking mountain flashed a shock in their eyes. This is the fourfold breath of Kendo's origin. Zhangfeng was short of breath, staring at this Kaidan Jinmeng, his eyes horrified like ghosts. Only with the same sword repair can we understand the horror of this sword. He could very clearly feel that Jian Wushuang's open sword swordsmanship far surpassed him in his understanding of Kendo. That is the fourfold breath of Kendo's origin. Even the Supreme may not be able to deduce his Tao to the quadruple level. I'm not an opponent, I have to run away. The thoughts in Zhang Feng's mind turned sharply, and the decision was made instantly. As soon as he stepped down, he wanted to fire away. However, he hadn't waited for him to rise from the giant pit. Huh! Kaidan Jinmeng, come suddenly. Get out of me! With a low roar, Zhangfeng raised his blue sword in his hand and held it above his head, blocking the slashing Kaitian sword. Countless sparks splattered, and the cloak of a cloak was instantly broken, revealing a muscular knotted body. His body full of divine power, frantically rushed into the blue sword, want to resist this open sky sword. However, regardless of the strength of the sword, the understanding of Kendo, or the grade of Wu weapon's Excalibur, they are far stronger than him. How could he resist it? In the face of absolute strength, all resistance is vulnerable. Click and wipe. I saw a blue Excalibur and began to crack. This crack started to spread quickly. Break it for me. Hidden and clenching his teeth, growling in a low voice. There are more and more cracks. The next moment, I saw the blue Excalibur completely broken and turned into countless fragments. Kaidan Jinmeng fell fiercely on the shoulder of Zhangfeng. The Tibetan seal was directly pressed into the giant pit by Kaidan Jinmeng, as if it had great strength, and he wanted to be pressed under the Wuzishan. Click, click. His legs, as he could not bear the huge force from Kaidan Jinmeng, his knees gradually bent. Then with a bang, Zhangfeng fell to his knees on the ground with his knees on the ground, forming two pits. And that Kaidan Jinmeng was still splitting on his shoulder and kept pressing down. The sharp sword's intention kept blasting in his body. After a while, Kaidan Jinmeng finally dispersed. Zhang Feng knelt down on the ground, his body slumped to the extreme, and his divine power was almost exhausted, apparently dying. A sword comes out, the blue is broken, and Zhangfeng kneels. Countless people watched this scene, all of which was a chill from the spine straight to the top of the head, such as falling ice cellar. They twisted their heads stiffly, staring at Xiang Wushuang dully, the disbelief in their eyes turned into shock. Even shaking the leader of the mountain also opened his mouth wide and straightened his eyes. Master Dong Xian stayed there, even forgetting that he was seriously injured. At this moment, Jian Wushuang looked like the sun in the sky, and everyone looked up. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm, and no emotion was seen on his face, as if he had only done something trivial to him. He looked faintly towards Zhangfeng and said indifferently, "The third sword." As soon as this remark came to an end, a moment of panic flashed in Zhangfeng's eyes. He turned to Hong Ye for help, raised his head hard, and said in a weak tone, "Red. Red leaves, save me." Hong Ye's eyes flashed, and he swept down in one step, blocked in front of the cover, and stretched out his hand. "Stop. We confess defeat in this battle, you take this monument." As soon as the voice came down, there was a flash of joy in the eyes of the leader of shaking the mountain, etc., and he turned his head to look at Jian Wushuang, and said, "Blood sword, you can." However, Jian Wushuang seemed to be oblivious, and said lightly, "I said that 3 swords are 3 swords, and no one can stop them. Third sword chop star. Hey!" In an instant, time seemed to be stagnant. The turbulent wind in the void, the floating clouds, and the floating dust all turned into the purest energy, just like the return of 100 rivers. It was radiated from all directions. Gather in your hands and turn into a silver sword rainbow with a length of 100 feet. Jian Wushuang spread his 5 fingers, holding this Baizhang Jianhong between heaven and earth, as if there was a force invisible, holding him up. At this moment he no longer covered his breath. A sharp sword surged up, as if to stir up chaos and open up the world. Jian Wushuang like the sword Ling Chen. Cut! Sword Wushuang spoke coldly. In an instant, Baizhang Jianhong slashed down. This sword, the mighty, directly blasted the sky nearly thousands of feet apart. This? Hong Ye's face changed suddenly. Facing the sword, even with him, a sense of powerlessness could be felt in his heart. There was a sense of threat like a thorn in his head, and it was hanging over him. For the first time, in addition to facing the giant, Hong Ye felt an illusion that he wanted to fall. This person. I can't stop it. Hong Ye took a deep breath, and her eyes were grim. He turned to look at Zhongfeng, shook his head and said, Zhongfeng, please ask for blessing. After speaking, Hong Ye stepped on her foot and fled quickly. Do not. Seeing this, Zhongfeng screamed a desperate growl. Star sword finally chopped down. Under this sword, as if the gods were angry, and the doomsday calamity was lowered, the earth began to split and separate, and there were abyss ravines that had no bottom. The violent sword spirit swept across all directions, set off a storm, and leveled everything. Everyone's face turned wild, and then they retreated thousands of feet. The power of one sword, such horror. Everyone took a sip of air conditioning, and the words came to their hearts. And in the middle of the storm, Wu Wei's Excalibur with no hands in the sword has taken back the ring of Qiankuan. The storm gradually dissipated, and I saw the land of 100 feet where Tibetan seals were located. There is still a little bit of hidden life in the hidden seal. Under this sword, the hidden seal is extinct, and the dead can't die anymore. Chapter 4256. Second more. Whirring. A breeze blows away the smoke gradually. Everyone looked at this scene, all shaking and shaking their hair. No one spoke, everyone's thoughts were still immersed in Jian Wushuang's amazing sword. The scene turned into a dead silence. This sword far exceeds their knowledge and understanding of kendo. This sword is comparable to the invincible master. Under this sword, the red leaves fled, and the Tibetan seal fell. So, how could this person be so powerful? The Tibetan seal, but the master of almost invincible level. 3 swords. This man really only produced 3 swords. And these 3 swords directly killed Zhongfeng. This man is from His Majesty the Overlord. It is indeed the blessing of the Overlord. Cut Lianga, retreat the red leaves, destroy the Tibetan seal. This person is invincible. Countless people shivered. But this discussion is a bit different. Under the control of the Jiuxing Holy Land camp, the teeth are shaking, the tone is full of panic, and the face is ashamed. They looked at Jian Wushuang in horror, trembling, afraid to move, for fear that Jian Wushuang was unhappy. They split a sword again and killed them all. They believed that if Jian Wushuang wanted to kill them, they would not be more difficult than beheading and killing Zhongfeng, the overlord of His Majesty the King. Although the expression is shocking, but in the discussion, it is full of joy. Fortunately, this blood sword comes from our side, otherwise who can stop him? With this blood sword in, who else can fear? Dong Xian's mouth opened wide, and an absurd feeling arose in his heart. It was this person that he even mentioned about him? Tell him to hide behind him, don't provoke others? Looking at Jian Wushuang, Dong Xian's face turned red for a while, and he could not wait to find a place to drill into it immediately. Blood sword. Including the leader of Shaking the Mountain, all rolled their throats and swallowed. Under this sword, even his heart could not guarantee that if he wanted to come with amazing defense, was he sure that he would take this star-cutting sword. In the middle of the storm, Jian Wushuang stepped in the void and stood with his hands on his back. His eyes were bright, and his black hair was spread over his shoulders. He is so ordinary, but at this moment, it is as dazzling as the stars in the sky. Countless light condensation. It seems that billions of stars are not as good as him. Feng Shenbei, I want it. Do you have any objections? Jian Wushuang bowed his head and looked down at the ultimate master of the 9-star Holy Land, and spoke lightly. Dare to dare. Suddenly, these remaining ultimate masters waved their hands quickly and did not dare to look directly at Jian Wushuang's eyes. Good. Jian Wushuang smiled, walked down from the air, and walked into the crowd of His Majesty the Overlord. Blood Sword, you really gave me one surprise after another. Shanshan said with a bitter smile. The world is the strongest, and now the sword is unparalleled enough to sit on an equal footing with him, even higher status than him. I'm just lucky, Jian Wushuang said with a smile. He shook the leader and heard a bitter smile, and stopped talking. Lucky? When he's stupid. Take a deep breath, shake the leader of the mountain and turn to look at the ultimate master of the 9-star Holy Land, Shinsheng said. Now, I give you two choices. First, you are all buried here for the 9-star Holy Land. All are here. That is to abandon the dark and cast the light, to take refuge in our Overlord. As soon as this remark was made, the remaining 9-star Holy Land was eventually dominated by His Majesty, and his face was full of joy. As long as they do not rush to kill them, they are naturally indispensable. Ill wait, willing to take refuge in His Majesty the Overlord. Suddenly, these remaining 9-star holy places were eventually dominated, and they all bowed their hands respectfully. Shaking the leader to see the situation, nodded in satisfaction and said, Since so, you will follow me to meet the Overlord. After a while, Xiaoshan commanded the Fengshen steel, and a large crowd swept away towards the 12th city. Overlord, in the 11th city. After returning to the first city, Xiao Shantong took the lead to arrange the ultimate masters of those 9-star holy places, and then found Jian Wushuang. Blood Sword, I told you about Lord Overlord. Lord Overlord is very curious about you right now. He is sending me to invite you to Overlord Palace. I plan to discuss merit rewards. Shaking the leader said with a smile. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Naturally, it was indispensable, and he said, Then it's troublesome to shake Shantong's tie. No trouble, it should be done. The leader of Xiaoshan smiled and waved his hand indifferently, and then led Jian Wushuang, walking towards a palace group. This palace group is extremely magnificent. There are no less than 1,000 ordinary palaces. In the center of this palace, an extremely majestic hall stands. The hall is composed of crystal white jade, the engraved 4-character Overlord shrine engraved on the card. The pen is broad and magnificent, full of atmosphere. They quickly walked outside the hall. See Sheikh Mountain Commander. The two masters responsible for guarding the temple arched. The leader of Sheikh Mountain nodded, counted as a response, and immediately looked at Jian Wushuang and said, Blood Sword, I will go ahead and let me know, and you will wait a bit here. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm, and he said, Go. The leader of Shaking Mountain no longer hesitated, strode into this Overlord shrine. After waiting for a while, a long snoring came from inside. Master Blood Sword, Overlord please. Jian Wu's eyes flashed, and he immediately stepped into this Overlord shrine. I saw the extremely spacious atmosphere built by this Overlord, supported by 4 pillars of heaven, coiled with golden dragons. Jian Wushuang looked up and saw a bronzing dragon seat at the center of the hall. It was made of top-quality materials. 6 large chairs were placed underneath, and 6 people sat side by side on this wooden chair. Shaking the leader, he sat in the second seat on the left. Jian Wu's eyes glanced over the faces of the 6 men, and the cultivation of these 6 men was almost invincible. Want to come? These 6 are the 6 leaders of His Majesty the Overlord. Jian Wushuang's eyes did not stay on the 6 people's faces for a long time, then they looked at the deepest part of the hall, placed on the dragon seat in the middle. There, a giant with a burly figure and muscular twisted knots, was sitting on the dragon seat. The man's skin was covered with mysterious golden runes, his face was heavy and his eyebrows were bright, and his eyes were full of brilliance, full of sense of indignation and self-righteousness. This person is impressively the deepest star in the ancient road, the owner of one of the 9 giants, the indestructible overlord, Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed for a moment. This person's blood were surging, where far away, Jian Wushuang could also feel the amount of wild violence contained in his body. When Jian Wushuang looked at this person, the same person also looked at Jian Wushuang. "Are you a blood sword?" The overlord voice muffled. "Blood sword, met overlord." Jian Wushuang converged his thoughts, arched his hand, and replied without humbleness or excitement. Chapter 4257. The first is more. Overlord Shrine. The 6 commanders sat side by side, all looking curiously at Jian Wushuang, wanting to see what is special about this newcomer who can kill 3 swords with almost invincible dominance and push back the red leaves. However, they were disappointed. Jian Wushuang's body was ordinary, and he could not see how strong and weak he was, just like the ordinary one among all beings. In the face of these various sights, Jian Wushuang's expression was calm and his heart had no waves, but he was at random guessing the strength of the overlord. This overlord is full of blood and dazzles like a big sun, which makes people dare not look at it. I'm afraid that some monks who are almost invincible dominate the level and have no qualifications to approach him. Is this the giant level strength? Jian Wu's eyes flashed. The strength of this overlord is definitely the most powerful of the invincible masters. Compared with the Jinan king and the 3 princes who were in the ruins of Tai Luo, they are much stronger. It can be said that among all the ultimate masters that Jian Wushuang has ever seen, this person can be called the strongest, except for King Jucai. Even in the face of the 9 kings who ultimately dominated the realm, it is estimated that this person's strength is only 1 line behind. "Blood sword, you don't need to be polite with the king," the overlord said lightly. Jian Wushuang put away his thoughts and nodded. "Blood sword, listen to Shaoshan said, this time he can get the Fengshan monument, you have a lot of credit. If it wasn't for your shot to kill Liang Yi and Zhangfeng, and push back the red leaves, this Fengshan monument would be early it fell into his hands." Overlord continued. Jian Wushuang heard the words, smiled slightly and said modestly, "The overlord joked and laughed, I just did a little bit of effort, not enough to affect the overall situation." "Oh, blood sword, you are strange. Others are trying their best to take credit for themselves, but you seem to be afraid of merit." The overlord was a little dumb. He usually sees his majesty dominance, almost everyone will use all his heart to show off his skills in front of him, bragging about how strong he is, no matter how big or small the credit is, he will try to win over him, just begging him to look at them a glance. And the sword Wushuang in front of him, from the beginning, not only did he not have a look of excitement and enthusiasm after seeing him, even when he took the initiative to praise, Jian Wushuang's expression was very calm from the beginning to the end. Color. This cannot help but let the overlord look at Jian Wushuang again in his heart. Do not be flattered, Taishan collapses without discoloration. The overlord looked at Jian Wushuang again. Just when he was about to say something, he suddenly reached the words of his mouth, as if he had discovered something incredible. His face changed slightly. Immediately, 3 inches of golden light were shot suddenly in his eyes to look at Jian Jinshuang. The next moment, the overlord retracted the golden light in his eyes, and Xinsheng said, "Blood sword, if the king is right, you have only the 5th level to dominate the repair, right?" As soon as this voice came to an end, the whole house was shocked. What? The 5th grade dominates? Impossible. The 5th level dominates the beheading, which is almost invincible. This is simply a night talk. It is impossible. Taking the 5th level as a practice, beheading is almost invincible. Such a thing has never happened before. Unheard of. Since ancient times, I have never heard of anyone who can use the 5th level to cut and kill nearly invincible dominators. Even the supremes who dominate the universe today may be in the 5th level domination. Can't do it. Surely it must be the overlord lord. You must be right. The expressions of the 6 leaders are very serious. Even the leader of Shaking the Mountain shook his head and couldn't believe it. In several eyes, Jian Wu's eyes flickered slightly, unexpectedly. His concealed practice was even seen by this overlord. Slightly groaning, Jian Wushuang simply no longer concealed, nodded back. Yes. After speaking, a breath belonging to the 5th level master immediately exuded from Jian Wushuang. Feeling this breath, the 6 leaders are all struck by lightning and their bodies are shaking. Really dominated by the 5th rank. Taking the 5th level as the master, the 3 swords beheaded for almost invincible levels. How can there be such a demon in this world? It's just crazy. In an instant, the entire Overlord Shrine was a sensation. The 6 leaders were dazzled, and their eyes fell out in shock. Even the Overlord, after getting the confirmation of Sword Unparalleled, was full of incredible colors in his eyes. Sure enough, it is the 5th level master. The Overlord uttered an exclamation. Jian Wushuang's 3 swords besieged the Tibetan seal, which is enough horror, but Jian Wushuang only has the 5th series to repair. What is the concept? As we all know, the 5th level and the ultimate sword have a huge gap, which is extremely difficult to cross. And once dominated from the 5th level and promoted to the ultimate dominator, it means that the 9 rules are merged, and the strength will be improved by a leap. Jian Wushuang can master the near-invincible dominator easily with only the 5th level dominance. Then what kind of concept will it be when he is promoted to the ultimate dominator? Suddenly, the 6 leaders were all cold, and they dared not think about it. The Overlord took a deep breath, and his expression gradually returned to calmness. He is one of the most powerful masters in the entire universe. The 5th level of Jian Wushuang dominates the nearly invincible master. Although it shocks him, it is not enough to make him speechless. Blood Sword, you can take refuge in His Majesty. The Overlord smiled and continued to say, Blood Sword, you can slay Tibetan seal. That means that you have already almost invincible dominance, and in our second 8 cities, nearly invincible dominates the level of combat power, known as commander-level combat power. Often, the owners of such powers, under the influence of any one of the forces, will assume the commanding position. His Majesty, naturally, the same. I don't know you, would you like to be my 7th commander? Jian Wushuang heard the words, a flash of thought flashed in his eyes, and then nodded with a smile. The Blood Sword, I would like to thank the Overlord for his love. Haha, don't say it again after carrying the word love. It's nothing more than that you and the prince are in the same position to win each other. The Overlord smiled boldly, then got up from the dragon seat, and looked out of the hall. Shen said, Come here, pass on the king's order. From today on, you will be given the seat of the Blood Sword commander, and the Blood Sword will be the 7th commander. Yes. Suddenly, there was a long chirp outside the door. A armor guard erected a black black gold chair with his hands and placed it next to the 6 commanders. After the sword Wushuang took his seat, the Overlord spoke again. Give another 10 million blood swords for the universe sword, 100 magic drugs and 3 top-notch rules. Yes. Chang Yen came from outside the door again. A armor guard held a jade plate in both hands and bowed his head in respect. On this jade plate, a black Qiankuan ring is quietly placed. This commandment represents the status of Jian Wushuang as the leader of one party, and the 10 million universe source stones given by the universe, as well as hundreds of magic drugs, are all in it. In such a big deal, even Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly, feeling a bit surprised. And this is not the end. The Overlord's voice came again. 3 blood swords, seal a monument. Chapter 4258. Second more. 3 blood swords, seal a monument. The words fell, and he saw a big wave from the Overlord, and a square stone tablet immediately waved from him. The stone rose in the wind, and soon it was like a small mound in the center of the hall. Jian Wushuang looked carefully, and saw that the steel was dark and covered with letters. Leader of the Blood Sword, hurry up and accept this monument. Overlord Shuanglong smiled. It is good. Jian Wushuang also did not quit, took a photo with his right hand, and put this sealed monument into the ring of heaven and earth. Await. Congratulations to the Blood Sword Commander. In the future, I will wait for 7 people to support and take care of each other. It is the concerted efforts of the 6 leaders. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and replied, "It must be." The overlord looked at this scene and nodded secretly, and then said to the 6 leaders, "Su Su, shaking the mountains, the cold wind. You wait for 6 people, each of whom chooses 10 ultimates from their majesty. Dominate and give it to the Blood Sword Commander." Yes. The 6 commanders should be quick to express their respect. Later, the overlord ordered some things and ordered to retreat. After Jian Wushuang and other 7 commanders took off, the overlord Jingu suddenly fell into a quiet state. The smile on the overlord's face gradually converged and disappeared, and toward the empty hall he said lightly, "Feng, what do you think of this blood sword?" The words fell, and saw a thin figure walking out from behind the overlord. His body was shrouded in black robes, making it hard to see his face. He knelt on one knee and said hoarsely, "Master, I don't see the strength of this blood sword, only a rough estimate. I'm afraid the threshold of invincible has been touched." Is the threshold of invincible domination? The overlord squinted his eyes, raised his head and looked away, without knowing what he was thinking. His fingers were beaten on the armrest of the dragon's seat rhythmically, and the sound of tuck 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 was made. And the black-robed figure continued to say, "Master Overlord," and "I can feel that the blood sword should have found me." The overlord nodded and heard no words. After a while, he slowly said, "This blood sword is not a simple generation. The king does not believe that a person who can dominate the repair with the 5th rank and kill nearly invincible dominators will remain silent in the universe. Feng, you go out to investigate the details of the blood sword for the king. Be sure to investigate for the king how the blood sword is sacred." Yes. As soon as the voice of the figure in black sank, he planned to fly away. And many more. The overlord spoke again, stopped him, and blinked in his eyes. "In this investigation, you must not alarm others, and there is one more thing for the king that needs to be explained to you." "What's the matter, Lord Overlord?" "But it doesn't matter. Go to the 10th city and look for the person in the refining tower who broke through the 8th floor. If you find this person, you must lower your attitude and tell him that the king has invited him and invite him to gather. Observe." After the figure in black left, the overlord sat on the dragon's seat, his eyes flashed with thought, and then he closed his eyes slowly. In just one day, Jian Wushuang's 7th commander's house was completed. It was made of various materials and looked luxurious. That night, the night breeze was learning. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged in a box room, holding in his hand the Qinkuan ring given to him by the overlord today. His eyes flashed with playfulness. Today in the hall, the Na seems to be bold and magnificent. In fact, Jian Wushuang can feel that this overlord is obviously quite suspicious of him. Behind the Na, there are a pair of cold eyes staring at him. However, Jian Wushuang did not fall into his heart. After all, his appearance and rise were too abrupt. Whoever changed it, Xinzhou would have some ideas. A few days later, when Wu Cry Excalibur is completely repaired, leave here. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed his thoughts. He entered the ancient city of Shinkong, not to kill others. Immediately, Jian Wushuang turned over with his right hand, and Wu Weiss Excalibur immediately crossed his knee. I saw a poisonous spot on the Wu weapon sword, which was caused by the venom of the Heavenly Serpent King who dropped on the Wu weapon sword. However, after Jian Wushuang's time to nourish with divine power, this poisonous spot has been removed for most of the time, leaving only some marks. It doesn't take long to think about it. Wu Cry Excalibur can be completely repaired. Jian Wushuang flipped his right hand again, and 2 fangs hovered quietly in front of him. These 2 fangs are the essence of Tian Snake Langjun. At the time, Tian Snake Langjun was killed by Jian Wushuang, and only these 2 fangs were left. These 2 fangs can probably refine 3 drops of venom, and with just 1 drop of venom, they can destroy and kill weaker invincible masters like Zhenan King. 3 of them come out, even if they are overlords. The owners of the extermination body must retreat. Jian Wu's eyes flickered, and he began to refine these two fangs. Time passed, and 3 months passed by. One day, Jian Wushuang was repairing secretly, and there was a heartbreaking laughter from outside the gate. Blood sword. I have screened the final masters in the hands of 6 people. Come and see. In the room, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes, and a faint flicker passed from his eyes. At that time, the overlord said that each of the 6 commanders selected 10 ultimate masters under his own command and transferred them to his sword master. He wanted to come to these 6 commanders after they had been screened. Coming. Jian Wushuang gave a faint reply, then stepped on his feet, and his body disappeared into the compartment. At the same time, at the entrance to the 10th city passage, a dark shadow condensed, and then, a monster with a stature and a barbed back was seen at the entrance to the 10th city passage. This is the 10th city? It doesn't seem to be anything special. The monster turned his white eyes slightly, looked up at the 10th city, and said aloud, "This person is a prisoner." "Hey, dog slave, you said that the blood sword is in the 10th city, right?" I saw a black chain next to him, holding a drooping old man with white hair. The drooping old man with white hair, with his hands and feet resting on the ground, looked at the prisoner's eyes, full of fear. "If Jian Wushuang is here, you will find that this old man is the city owner of the 9th city. Veteran ultimate dominate." Yes, but I don't know if Bloodsword has left 10th city and entered the latter 8 cities. The 9th city trembled. "Hey, it's fine, I can find him slowly." Prison Dragon grinned, revealing 2 rows of sharp teeth. Chapter 4259. The first is more. 10th city. The dragon dragged the owner of the 9th city and strolled on the streets of the 10th city, which immediately caught attention. "Who is this person?" Then, the old man being held. "Why do I look so familiar?" "No. This old man is the owner of the 9th city. Thousands of gods are the ultimate masters of the old brand. How can they be treated as slaves? What is the origin of this person?" Suddenly, after the identity of the old man who had no hair was recognized, he suddenly caused an exclamation in the crowd, and everyone quietly avoided some and kept a distance from the prison dragon. But there are also the ultimate masters who can't see the eyes, and immediately stood up. One of them said with a cold face, "Sir, the Emperor Qianji always treats people well, never participates in disputes. I don't know where he offends you, and you are treated like this." Treat him like a pig? Thousands of gods, as the ultimate masters of the old brand, spent tens of thousands of years in the 9th city of Shinkong Ancient Road. They are also good old people, and their popularity is not bad. Those who stood up and spoke were those who had received the grace of the 1,000 gods. When the prisoner saw this, he smiled suddenly, clapping at the head of the Emperor Qianji casually, squatting at the head of the Emperor Qian Huang, squinting and smiling. "Dog slaves, I don't think you are in a place where you get together in the waist. Popularity is pretty good." Thousands of gods shivered in his heart, and did not know what happened to him. The prisoner dragon was so humiliated, his face was not full of anger, but full of fear. "Dog minion, I think these people are too noisy, do you think?" Prison dragon raised his head and looked at the ultimate masters who uttered the words of justice. He laughed. After hearing the words, the god of thousands of gods nodded and quickly nodded, as if the dog was begging for mercy to its owner, to please him. "Ha, you are becoming more and more slaves." Prisoner Long burst into a laugh, then slammed out with his right hand, and grabbed at the ultimate masters who uttered the words of justice. "I let them come with you. Call out." I saw that the prisoner's arms were elongated in an instant, and the nails on the 5 fingers became dark and sharp, as if they were trained in 5 ways. Court death. Suddenly, the ultimate masters changed their colors, and their spirits surged up, banging fiercely towards the arms of prison dragon. Just like the stone sinking into the sea, these ultimate dominating attacks landed on the arms of the prisoner dragon, and even the waves did not stir, they were blasted away. Next moment, the 5 fingers of the prison dragon snapped at the neck of one of the ultimate dominators. "Come here." The prisoner gave a smirk, and instantly, the ultimate master was arrested by the prisoner. No matter how he struggles with the ultimate master, the 5 fingers of Prison Dragon are like 5 towering mountains, making him unable to move at all. I seem to hear you accusing me just now? Prison Dragon chuckled, and a bone spur shot from his back, turning it into a black chain, binding the ultimate dominator neck fiercely. Since you are so distressed by the dog slaves, then you can accompany him. Seeing that the remaining ultimate dominated, his face suddenly changed, and he turned away from him. However, behind the Prison Dragon, the black bone spurs turned into black chains again, violently blasting towards these ultimate masters. In just a few breaths of time, these ultimate masters were penetrated by the black chain by the gods. Immediately afterwards, among these terrible screams of ultimate domination, all fell into powder. For a moment, on the streets of the 10th city, the weird low laughter and sorrowful wailing of Prison Dragon resounded one after another. On another street, Hao Emperor is holding a spear, wearing an armor, and is patrolling. After Jian Wushuang left, he took refuge in Lord Lan. Now, under Lord Lan, while serving as an armor guard, he sharpens himself and improves his cultivation, and strives to pass the refining tower trials at an early date, and enters the 8 cities, and attaches to Sword Wushuang. Hearing the screams of the street next to him, Hao Emperor frowned, and decided to go over to see the situation. Walking to the side street, the Master Hao Emperor immediately saw the death of several masters by the Prisoner Dragon. Well, another one. A white eye of Prison Dragon twisted slightly, looking at the Hao Emperor who was coming, the corner of his mouth slowly raised upwards, evoking an evil smile. Hao Emperor dominated his heart for a moment. He was not a dull man. When he saw this scene, he didn't know that this person was far from himself, and he turned to escape. This man is smart. The Prison Dragon shook his head, and when he was going to release Hao Emperor to dominate a horse, suddenly, the 1,000 Princes said, "Master, aren't you looking for the blood sword?" Little remember that the man was originally with the blood sword. The companion, if caught, must know the whereabouts of the blood sword. Oh! The prisoner raised a brow and shot with a big hand. He grabbed Hao Emperor who had fled thousands of miles. Hao Emperor dominated his face, but he also knew that the struggle was useless, and he simply resigned his fate and let the prisoner catch it. "You, what do you want?" Hao Emperor looked at Prison Dragon, his lips trembling a little. The Prisoner Dragon looked up and down at Hao Emperor, and he smiled. "I ask you, do you know where the blood sword is?" "Look for Master Blood Sword?" Hao Emperor dominated his heart for a moment. At the same time, the 12th city. After Jian Wushuang ran out of the command house, he immediately saw 6 commanders including the leader of Shaking the Mountain coming together, and there were 60 ultimate masters standing behind them. When I saw Jian Wushuang coming out, in addition to shaking the 10 ultimate masters behind the leader of the mountain, because I had seen Jian Wushuang's shots, and his expression was in awe, the remaining 50 ultimate masters were all casually looking at Jian Wushuang. Expression of disdain, without any respect. "Blood sword, someone brought you, I will leave when there is still something to do." Shaoshan and other 6 leaders greeted with a smile. "It is good." Jian Wushuang nodded. Several people chatted casually, and the 6 leaders left, leaving only Jian Wushuang and the 60 masters. Originally, these 6 leaders were still there. The 50 ultimate masters were not too presumptuous. When the 6 leaders were gone, all of them suddenly looked at Sword Master Sword, and suddenly became all sorts of contempt. Disdain. Jian Wushuang shook his head in his heart, knowing that these people were disdainful to him, and also knew that he was suddenly transferred away from his original commander. They were dissatisfied, and wanted to give him a power. However, Jian Wushuang didn't bother to care about these people, and said lightly, "Whatever you do, I don't make too many constraints, as long as you don't bother me." After that, Jian Wushuang turned and walked away, and now Wu Wu's Excalibur is about to be repaired. The 2 fangs of Tianxi Langjun are about to be refined. After these 2 things are completely done, it's time he left. Chapter 4260. Second More. just as Jian Wushuang left. Blood Sword, I heard that you are still the 5th grade master, right? A bald man stepped out of the crowd and looked down at Jian Wushuang with his chin, smiling with a smile. Swordless Wu stepped back, looked back at the bald man, and said lightly, "Yes, I really only have the 5th grade to dominate the repair, but what about it?" The voice came to an end. There was a sudden burst of laughter in the crowd. Ha ha, a 5th level master dominated but still want to lead our group of ultimate masters? It is a joke. 5th grade master? This slap can shoot a group. Well, wouldn't it be ridiculous if I waited for you to be ruled by a 5th ranked leader? These ultimate masters all sneered. The 10 ultimate dominators brought by the leader of Shake Mountain saw their anger suddenly. They are grateful for Jian Wushuang. They knew that if there was no Jian Wushuang at the beginning, let alone the Fengshan Monument, whether they can still stand and live here is a question. What are you talking about? Although the Lord Bloodsword has only the 5th level master to repair, but the combat power is definitely the best of the masters. Zheng Sanjian beheaded the Tibetan seal that is almost invincible. These 10 ultimate masters, someone retorted immediately. However, this man's voice was too small, and soon he was drowned in a huge laughter. 5th grade dominates, and beheading is almost invincible. Do you believe such ridiculous jokes? The bald man looked at the 10 ultimate masters who were angry and squeaked, then stared straight at Xiang Wushuang, looked at him up and down, and sneered, "If this blood sword really has this kind of combat power, I am afraid that have you made a name for yourself in the universe, wouldn't you still be infamous now? I see. This is the bureau set up by the other camps, and its purpose is to perform this kind of drama specially for our overlord, so that the blood sword can enter the overlord camp is entrusted with a heavy task." Shut up. When the Lord Bloodsword beheaded and killed Tibetan seal, we witnessed it with our own eyes, and we couldn't do anything fake. After he finished, the ultimate master said coldly. The bald-headed man heard the words, and immediately flickered his lips, and said indifferently, "Who knows if you have already been assimilated by several other camps." As soon as this sentence came to an end, the 10 ultimate masters brought by the leader of Shake Mountain suddenly changed their faces. The needle fell instantly in the audience. The power of this sentence is too great. It almost means that the 10 of them are spies sent by other giants. Seeing this, the bald man was a little conscious, and said aloud again, "Of course, I just said so casually, I didn't mean to you." And the 10 ultimate masters, who can't bear it at this moment, in a short time, the divine power began to surge. For a moment, the atmosphere at the scene was tense and threatening. Jian Wushuang looked at this scene, his frown slowly wrinkled. Now that he is about to leave, he doesn't want to involve too much. In the face of the 60 masters who are divided into his hands, he also has an attitude of opening his eyes and closing his eyes. As long as this group of people do not act too much, he followed. And this does not mean that Jian Wushuang is weak and deceived. Does not represent the majesty of Jian Wushuang allowing others to challenge him. "What's your name?" Jian Wushuang looked at the bald man, expressionless. The bald man didn't have any fear on his face, and his chest sneered sneerily, "If you don't change your name, you can't change your name. You can call me a god." "Blood King?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and said lightly, "Since you are not convinced that I can sit in this commanding position, how about we gamble?" "Oh, are you gambling with me?" Xuepingshin raised an eyebrow, then laughed and teased, "Little guy, how do you want to gamble with me? It's very simple. I only show one finger. If you can take it, you will sit in the commanding position from now on. My blood sword is obediently sent. There is absolutely nothing to say." Jian Wushuang said lightly. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's voice suddenly became cold. "If you can't take it, then I'll kill you." The words said that Jian Wushuang had already carried a bit of coercion, and for a while, the blood-stained was actually cold in his heart, and there was an illusion of kneeling down to surrender. Taking a deep breath, the Blood Emperor's heart sneered and sneered, "You are only the 5th level master, why don't you dare?" Hearing this, Jian Wushuang didn't have any expression yet, and the 10 ultimate masters brought by the leader of Shake Mountain had already mourned in their hearts for this blood-stained god. They glanced at each other. They could see the pleasure in each other's eyes. Obviously, they have already hated this bloodthirsty monarch. Then start. The sword was expressionless and expressionless, raised his fingers, and pressed toward the bloodstained with his eyebrows. Every sharp sword spirit began to condense at the sword's fingertips. Gyuanden. Although the bloodstain seems to be reckless, he doesn't really despise Jian Wushuang as much as he seems, and quickly took a top-class defense rule treasure from the ring of Qiankuan. Hey! The sword qi continued to condense at the fingertips of the sword unparalleled, and the entire governing house actually trembled with it. Like a storm vortex composed of sword gas, formed at his fingertips. Suddenly, the faces of many of the ultimate dominators at the scene changed greatly. They could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the sword fingertips. This finger is enough to burst the planet. Back. Suddenly, these dozens of ultimate masters gave a low drink, and they all retreated backwards. And the blood cloak who was locked by the finger of Jian Wushuang had a pale expression, and a lot of bean sweat was pouring from his forehead. He gritted his teeth tightly and watched Jian Wushuang's finger that kept pressing closer to him, and the fingers that were constantly enlarged in his pupils, all trembling with fear. He wanted to escape with those ultimate masters, but invisible, it was like an extremely powerful aura to suppress him, so that his feet could not move at all. How could this be happening? The blood-puffed god did not dare to give way. Gradually, in his eyes, this finger rested on the Guiyuan shield blocking him. Click and wipe. There is no hindrance at all. This Guiyuan shield, known for its strong defense, splits cracks directly and finally, it falls apart. Next moment, this finger is constantly enlarged in the pupils of the blood cloak god, getting bigger and bigger. In the end, this finger hit his eyebrow. Chapter 4261. The first is more. After seeing Jian Wushuang's finger point at the position of Xie Pengshenjin's eyebrow, Xie Pengshen felt the tremendous pressure from Jian Wushuang's fingertips, but his legs were soft, and he knelt down under Jian Wushuang. No, don't, master, I know I'm wrong. His throat kept rolling, and sweaty beads dripped down his forehead. Late. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head. At his fingertips, one after another sharply sharpened his sword, and shot into the blood of the Emperor Blood King. Ha! A loud blast exploded. Immediately, the blood cloak smashed his body, and there was no breath of life. The remaining dozens of ultimate masters, with the exception of those brought by the leader of Shaking Mountain, had a horror-like horror on their faces and a trembling body. What is this anti-combat power? Everyone was trembling. Someone who used to provoke the sword unparalleled before was even more trembling, almost scared to the ground. Those who can walk to the 8 cities on the ancient road to the sky, naturally, no one will be the weak. If they are placed in the outside world, they are arrogant in the holy places of their respective ancestors, and the man who dared to be the leader is the one who is the leader. Confidence in his own strength, he is among the top powerful among these dozens of ultimate dominators. As a result, it was such a strong man who was defeated by the sword unparalleled, so he was killed with one finger? How strong is this blood sword? Everyone dared not think about it. And the 10 ultimate masters brought by the leader of Shake Mountain looked at each other with a smile, and there was no surprise on their faces. Even the Tibetan seals, which were almost invincible, were killed by the sword Wushuang Sanjian. Peng is just the top powerhouse in the ultimate domination. But what they didn't expect is that this time, Sword Wushan didn't even use the sword. With just one finger, the blood sacrifice was killed. This could not help Ling Jianxia's position in their hearts, and once again raised the grade. You are the 7th leader of me, but you still have objections? Jian Wushuang stood with his hands, his eyes faintly glanced from the faces of these dozens of masters, and he smiled and said with a smile, "Dare to dare." Suddenly, the dozens of masters quickly shook their heads like rattles. When Jian Shuangshuang saw this, he would no longer care about them and walked slowly toward a compartment. I haven't ordered anyone to approach this room 10 feet. When the voice landed, the two wooden doors of the chamber automatically opened, and the sword stepped in without a step, and then there was a muffled sound, and the chamber's wooden door closed tightly. Years go by, spring and autumn change. A time is over. For 60 years, a pi is already half of life for mortals, but for monks, it is just a matter of time. Deep inside the seventh commander's mansion, there was a muffled sound from a dust-tight chamber. I saw a stern young man with black hair sitting cross-legged in this room. He closed his eyes slightly, and in front of him was placing an ancient sword code. The sword code is engraved with the sharp word, Taro, which is truly the 30 Swords of Chaos, which was well known in the universe before chaos. The next moment, I saw the stern young man in black hair, and slowly opened his eyes flashed slightly. Although the retreat of the armor time is not long or extremely short, it is an unusually large increase in the sword, unparalleled improvement. In these 60 years, Jian Wushuang not only repaired the venom-eroded area of Wu weapon sword without damage, but also thoroughly condensed the two fangs into 3 drops of supreme venom sufficient to kill the invincible lord. This means that Jian Wushuang's assassin will be one more. Once these 3 drops of venom are used at the right time, they will be able to easily kill low-ranking invincible masters such as Zhenan King and 3 princes. Jian Wushuang will get rid of the dilemma of relying on the Yongye sword to kill the invincible master. I'm afraid that even the 9 giants deep in the ancient road of the starry sky and the Zeon who dominates the universe will die under these 3 drops of venom if they are slightly careless. And this, the improvement of the sword unparalleled, is nothing. In this armor time, Jian Wushuang's biggest improvement is Kendo. After breaking through the origin of the 4th level cosmic Kendo, Jian Wushuang has never had time, and he has to sort out his own origin of the 4th level Kendo. In these 60 years, Jian Wushuang relied on the 4th source of the universe as Kendo, not only reorganizing and deducing all Kendo magical powers that he has come all the way, checking for gaps, but also slashing the sword of the star from Deshang push to a perfect state. In addition, he continued to enlighten Yongyi and truly grasp it. Jian Wushuang believes that once he uses the Yongye magical power again, the power will have a leap in leaps and bounds. Even the 9 kings who first dominated the realm of the universe in the end will face the wing forever now. It's just a pity that I can't see the second move of Tai Luo Jiandian, Breaking Dawn. Jian Wushuang sighed, but he also understood that the 5 magical powers recorded in the Tai Lu sword code were in fact supreme masters. He could understand Yongyi, but he had already gone fortune and wanted to understand others. At least the next sword move, he also has to reach the ultimate level, only then has a chance. However, this is enough. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Now he is confident. If it is not invincible, the ordinary ultimate dominion will not be able to pose any threat to him. Start a battle. Now, I'm almost out of here. After a moment of contemplation, Jian Wu's eyes began to flash. He joined the Overlord camp, except that he wanted to find a foothold at the beginning and figured out the rules of the Hoqing city. Now that he has almost completely figured out the situation, it is time to leave here and go to find the God Monument. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to get up and leave, in his mind, there was a rumor of shaking the mountain leader. Leader of the Blood Sword, come to the Overlord Shrine and find 6 sealed monuments in the 16 cities. Jian Wushuang frowned when he heard the news. 5 Fengshen monuments? Fengshenbai represents the qualification to participate in the universal races. Only the more Fengshen monuments received, the more hopefully they will enter the universal races and strive to become the boy in the seat of the great seat and have the qualification to listen to the sermon. Nowadays, almost half of the Fengshen tablets have flowed into the hands of the 9 giants, and they are in the hands of the 9 giants. In the hands of them, there are still Fengshen monuments that have not yet been born. This time, the 5 monuments to the gods are displayed together, which is enough to shake the whole Ho 8 cities. You know, even if it is the 9 giants, if you calculate it slightly, you only have 10 sufficient Fengshen monuments in your hands. Just let's take a look first. Jian Wushuang made a decision in his heart and immediately flew towards the Overlord Shrine. Chapter 4262. Second more. Not long after, Jian Wushuang came to Overlord Jingu. In the hall, the Overlord took the first place, with a staring expression. Under him, the 6 leaders were sitting in a serious position, without squinting, and his face was also dignified to the extreme. When Jian Wushuang saw his brow, he could not help but immediately arch the archway. "See, King." The Overlord nodded and said lightly, "Sit down." After Jian Wushuang sat in the 7th seat, the Overlord took a deep breath, glanced across their faces, and said with a deep voice, "My king summoned you. Presumably you also know what the reason is." "Yes, in the 16th city, there are 5 monumental monuments." As soon as this remark came to an end, the 6 leaders received a firm reply from the Overlord, and their pupils shrank slightly. "You know, the 5 monuments are not a small number. Don't look at the last 8 cities, there are 99 sealed monuments, but in fact each of them is divided into 9 giants, and there are only about 10, plus some who have not yet been born, and who do not know unconsciously. It was even less taken by some solo travelers and left in the hands of the 9 giants. From this we know how important these 5 monuments to the world are." Now, the people in the 8 cities behind the ancient starry sky all rushed to the 16 cities to fight for the seal of the monument. Naturally, we must not miss it. The Overlord's eyes flickered slowly and he said slowly, "This time, in addition to the virtual leader who stayed at the Overlord Shrine, the other 6 leaders, the Cold Wind leader, the Mountain Shake leader, the Blood Sword leader, the Speed Rate leader Lord, go to the 16 cities and fight for the seal of the gods." "Yes." After the Overlord said, the 7 men including Jian Wushuang stood up, and they should be stunned. "Well, presumably the people of the 9 giants have already rushed to the 16th city at this moment. Don't delay your time. Let's go today. Let's go." Out of the Overlord Shrine, the 6 leaders returned to their respective governing houses to convene the master, and agreed to set out after 3 hours. Jian Wu's eyes twinkled. He originally wanted to leave today, but now that the 5 monumental monuments are here, he changed his mind. Before leaving, he took the 5 monumental monuments and said, returning to the 7th commander's palace, Jian Wushuang stood in the void and said with a deep voice. The 7th commander's office obeyed the order and quickly went out of the gate. With this seat, he went to the 16th city to fight for the seal of the gods. The words fell, and suddenly within the 7th commander's mansion, all of them rose into the sky, standing respectfully behind Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang glanced back at them, nodded slightly with satisfaction, and said, "There are 5 sealed monuments in the 16th city. I must get 5 sealed monuments. Thus, follow the command." Dozens of ultimate congratulatory compliments should be, "The sound is soaring." After 3 hours, the 6 leaders including Swordsman, Shaking Mountain and Cold Wind converged and rushed towards the 16th city. Over 9 days, the howling wind howled. Jian Wushuang and other 6 commanders, a total of hundreds of ultimate masters set foot in the air, covering the sky and the sun, the mighty Blood Sword. This time the 5 Fengshan monuments are here. It is presumed that those who own power in the last 8 cities will not miss this opportunity. They will rush to the 16th city, and even some of them have already stepped into invincibility. We must be careful to dominate the strong, and we must not underestimate the enemy. Leader Sheikh said on the side. He was afraid that Jian Wushuang would be proud and complacent because he besieged a Tibetan seal, so he succumbed to Hubei King Tianjiao. Invincible master? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Yes, the latter 8 cities are the dominant powers that converge the entire universe. It is not just that the 9 giants are invincible. The 9 giants are just the most powerful among the invincible. The leader of Shake Mountain had a dignified expression, and Shen Sheng said, even under the command of the 9 giants, there are invincible masters. For example, the young emperor who worships the kingdom of God has a long-established invincible master. On weekdays, these invincible masters rarely take action, but this time the 5 monumental monuments are here, and I am sure that there will be invincible masters participating in the battle. Jian Wushuang nodded when he heard the words. The universe is vast and endless. Tianjiao Yingjia emerges endlessly, and the 8 cities behind the ancient sky are the places where the entire universe Tianjiao is gathered. In addition to the 9 giants, there are other invincible masters, which is normal. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes filled with turmoil. For him now, the ordinary ultimate master is nothing more than a rotten fish, and he can be crushed to death with one finger. Even if it is an almost invincible ultimate master, he can't support a few tricks in front of him. Only invincible can bring Jian Wushuang's heartwarming warfare in mind. While chatting, they rush towards the 16th city. The closer to the 16th city, the more the sword Wushuang could feel the violent atmosphere in the air. Around them, there is always the ultimate master with a strong breath, hurriedly passing by in all directions. 3 days later, they finally arrived at the 16th city Fengshan Monument. I saw 5 monuments to the sky, like 5 pillars, standing on top of the peak, exuding terrifying power, and the void around these 5 monuments, already full of the ultimate masters of the major camps. Countless strong men stand on top of the void, and the black pressure cannot see the end, and the divine power is released, and the power and pressure are in all directions, making the void tremble. One pole represents the flags of the major forces, and was blown up by the howling wind. Shaking the mountain commanded his eyes and looked at them, and his heart sank. The great emperor of the kingdom of the sun, the great emperor of the kingdom of the great god, the son of the holy land of 9 stars, the son of blood in the temple of blood, the chief of the tribe of the Mora family. Except for the blue lord who guards the 10th city, the giant camp is coming. Jian Wushuang also faintly looked at the strong man standing in the void, and could not help but whispered. In this crowd he actually saw an acquaintance. That was Moro Yengu, who had had a war with him. However, at this moment, Moro Yengu's breath has become much stronger and stronger than when he met in the 8th city. Just standing there gives a strong deterrent. Want to come, Mo Luo Yengu at this moment. The injury has been cured. And he is the leader of the Mo Luo tribe, this time fighting for Fengshan Monument. When Jian Wushuang looked at him, Mo Luo Yengu also locked his eyes on Jian Wushuang. It's him! Mo Luo Yengu's huge eyes were slightly narrowed. The next moment, he twisted his neck, and there was a surging war on his face. In the last battle with Jian Wushuang, his strength was only 50% recovered, so he was suppressed by Jian Wushuang. And this time, he will really let go of the battle. Let's go too. The leader of Shake Mountain took a deep breath and walked towards the 5 sealed monuments in a heavy pace. Chapter 4263. The first is more. 16th city, where 5 monumental monuments are now. The countless ultimate dominates the void and exudes a hint of power. At a glance, the flags covered the sun, and the blackness was the ultimate dominator. The 6 leaders, such as Shaking Mountain and Jian Wushuang, are not weak among these countless forces. As they walked towards the void around the 5 sealed monuments, some of the ultimate masters shrank their pupils and fled. Cold Wind, Overlord, is this guy leading you this time? Among the various camps, the leader of the Blood Temple Hall is an evil young man wearing a blood robe. He sat on a large chair and glanced across the faces of the 6 leaders, including Shaking Mountain and Jian Wushuang. Finally, in the Overlord camp, the Cold Wind leader who was in charge of the team leader was amused. The leader of the Cold Wind is the first commander of His Majesty the Overlord, and it is also recognized as the first strongest before Jian Wushuang joined His Majesty. This time competing for the 5 Fengshan steels, it is the Cold Wind leader who is in charge of the overall situation. According to Jian Wushuang's understanding, this Cold Wind leader was the one who first joined His Majesty the Overlord, and has the longest experience. He has been used by the Overlord as the trump card, and few shots have been taken. The evaluation of Shanshan Commander for this person is only 4 words, which is unfathomable. The Cold Wind leader heard the questioning, his face suddenly sank, and a few icy murderous flashed in his eyes. Blood sacrifice, needless to say, more nonsense. This time the battle for the seal of the steel, we will resolve all the previous grudges and grievances. Cold Wind commanded indifferently. Haha, don't worry, after the guy from the Qiang Divine Kingdom comes, even if you don't say it, I will fight you. The evil young man, calling for blood puckering, covered his mouth and laughed. The blood sword, the Cold Wind leader, and this blood sacrifice had long augured out of the starry sky ancient road. Later, when the people of Qiang Divine Kingdom arrived, when the battle really started, you shot with us and kill first. Let's talk about the blood dying, otherwise, this person must be a confidant. Shanshan commanded in Jian Wushuang's brain. Jian Wushuang nodded when he heard the words. The blood was full of evil spirits. If it was coercion, it could be one of the most dazzling strong players in the audience. I'm afraid that it is not invincible, but also half a step away from invincible. A distant top powerhouse. Rumble. As everyone discussed plans for countermeasures later, a loud roar rang out in the sky. I saw a carriage driven by a 3-footed Jin Wula stepping from a distance. The carriage was so majestic, the front was driven by a huge 3-legged gold owl, and the bronzed wheels carved dragons and phoenixes. Any void that was crushed by the wheels left 2 long flames. From a distance, it looks like a scorching sun, pushing forward. On both sides of the carriage, there were dozens of powerful ultimate masters with solemn expressions, guarding on both sides, striding forward. At the head of the carriage, a huge banner was hung, writing the word Qiang. The horse-drawn carriage immediately attracted the attention of the audience. Everyone looked up and looked grimly. One of the 9 giants, the Lord of Qiang Demon, arrived. Isn't this golden wagon a royal car for the Lord of Qiang? Might it be the Lord of the Red Sun who shot it himself? Impossible, there is an agreement between the 9 giants, and they can't do it now. I don't know the Lord of the Qiang Devil, who will be sent to fight for the seal of God this time. Except for the blue man who guards the 10th city, the strong men under the 9 giants have really come. Everyone talked. At the moment when the Jinwu carriage appeared, Jian Wushuang also looked in the past, but slightly different from others. Through the curtain of the carriage, he saw the figure sitting in the carriage. The man's blonde hair was with a headband at will, and a few strands of hair in his forehead hung down. A handsome face was full of indifference and arrogance. When Jian Wushuang looked at him, he suddenly felt something, turned his head towards Jian Wushuang. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang felt only 2 raging flames, which shot into his eyes fiercely, which made him unable to bear his pupils to shrink. This person is absolutely invincible. Jian Wushuang retracted his gaze, and a flash of thought flashed on his face. If he was not invincible, this person would never be able to find his gaze, let alone see through the void and see him directly. Inside the carriage, the blonde young man noticed Jian Wushuang's gaze receding, and his mouth uttered a cold hum. A moment later, the golden wagon arrived beside Fengshan Monument. An ultimate master guarding both sides of the carriage, he strode to the carriage and opened the carriage curtain. Immediately, he saw a tall, indifferent young man wearing a golden armor and holding a trident on both sides, stepping down from the carriage. His gaze swept across the audience, without staying for anyone, as if no one in the audience could catch his eye. How could it be him? This person is a Jinwu tribe, the Emperor of Jinwu the Great. I can't think of the Lord of Qiang, even let him fight for the seal of the gods. Well, although Emperor Jinwu is not one of the giants, but if it comes to combat power, I am afraid that he is not under the 9 giants at all. In general, the Qiang Demon Lord cannot dispatch him. Fighting for the monument, what good promises have been made? Emperor Jinwu always has the name not a giant, is better than a giant, is the first person in the 8 cities behind the ancient sky and the recognized giant. He comes to fight, who can stop him? The audience ultimately dominated, and after seeing this person, there was a commotion. Even the leaders of their respective camps, such as Xue, became cloudy for a while. No one had thought that for the 5 seals of the monument, the demon master of the kingdom of Qiang sent the Emperor Jinwu over. Blood sword, this time I'm in trouble. The Emperor Jinwu is a real invincible dominator. It is enough to stand up to the Titan. Although he said he was lodged under the Lord of the Red Lord never dispatched him, and I don't know it. What cost did the Qiang Demon Master once ask for? Shocking Mountain Commander took a deep breath and said solemnly. Jian Wushuang didn't reply, but the war in his eyes became more and more surging. Yeah, that's why he wants to see the ancient sky. Tianjiao got together, and all races fought. What is the point of it if it's just some rotten fish, stinky shrimp, and terrier? The emergence of Emperor Jinwu is just the beginning. In the ensuing time, there were several powerful men who were unprecedentedly powerful and obviously had stepped into the threshold of invincible dominance. These strong men do not show up in the world on a weekdays, and have never trusted in any of the giants, but today, they all came out to break through the 5 seals and come from all over. With the advent of these powerful men, the 16th city suddenly became stormy and undercurrents. Although the fighting has not yet erupted, the sense of depression faintly permeated in the void has almost condensed into substance, giving people a sense of rain and wind coming from the wind. Everyone knows that once the battle breaks out, it will be shocking. That you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.